The recording.
It's being recorded. It's fine to record too, as long as it isn't like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Steve, when Jonathan spoke, it echoed, but it's not doing that. Oh, you had your.
It was all of it, like 15 computer monitors over there. Just not having
I
that.
like the portable office. I said I like the portable office. It's cool.
So sometimes the sandwich might be in the camera angle, it might have to be your different response, like, what? With a very stern left turn.
So, City Clerk, are we ready to go?
Recording in progress.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Just making sure, is everybody muted, having a laptop open? You are too, John? Or not? Well, someone echo.
I'll call to order this special study session of the Los Altos City Council at 5:31. City Clerk, would you please confirm quorum?
Yes, Mayor. Members of the council, if you are present, please indicate so by saying aye or here. Councilmember Fliger.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee Ang.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Meadows.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Enander.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor, you have a quorum with no one absent.
Thank you very much. The only item on the agenda for this special study session is our sixth cycle housing element for 2023. 2020. 31, yeah, right? There's a typo in the agenda. So a little over 2 weeks ago, we received our first formal letter back from HCD, the subcommittee, which consists of Councilmember Fliger and myself, met and recommended to council that we change our originally scheduled agenda for tonight's meeting and instead hold a study session to receive additional public comments on the housing element update. And the council agreed with that at the last meeting. That is therefore the primary purpose of tonight's special meeting for the city to receive public comments on the housing element update draft. Staff report details all of the public outreach that the city has conducted to date. I would like to emphasize that the city started the HEU process in April of 2021. And since that time, the city has continued to host community workshops and outreach and to receive comments from the public. After tonight, the housing element update will be heard by the Planning Commission on January 5th, 2023, which will be another opportunity for the public to comment, and the plan for the council is for the housing element update to go to city council for consideration. And of course, public comment will be taken then as well on January 10th and 24th, 2023. And of course, I want to emphasize that the city will continue to take public comments outside of meetings. You are welcome to submit those at any time up to and until the HEU is adopted by the city. So with that preparatory comment, Mr. Zorn, do you want to say anything before we move to public comment?
No, Madam Mayor, I think we can go ahead and accept public comment regarding the housing element study session.
And following the protocol that we used 2 weeks ago at our regular meeting, we will take comment from anyone who is physically present and wishes to comment, and then we will take comment from anyone who is virtual. So is there anyone in the chamber who would like to comment? City Clerk, I see no one present. In fact, I'm getting negative head shakes. But before I move to virtual comment, I see a hand from Councilmember Lee Ang. Do you have a question, Councilmember?
Yes, I do have a question. Would this be appropriate? Would you like me to ask my questions now? Because I think you asked if anyone had a question, had a comment, and I do have questions instead of a comment.
I think we'll take public comment first, and then we will
Okay.
have discussion, questions and discussion among council after.
Okay, I would think that people would like to hear the questions. Okay, thank you.
So City Clerk, do we have anyone online who would like to comment?
Those of you that are participating at this meeting virtually, please raise your hand at this time to speak on this item, and we will call upon you.
And City Clerk, you'll note I do not have my laptop open, so I won't be able to see how many hands are raised and so on, so I'll be reliant entirely on you.
Thank you, Mayor, for that. Currently, we have 3 hands up at the moment. Popping up.
Okay, then let's give everyone 3 minutes, please. And we'll take them in the order as we go.
Sounds good. Our first speaker is Mr. Joe Bedonato.
Yes, hi, good evening. I don't have a comment on the topic. I was just going to let you guys know the Zoom link in the agenda online is not working. And so when I switched over to the Zoom link for the city council meeting tonight, I was able to log into this meeting, but I don't know if others are having this problem or just me, but I tried multiple times and was having that issue. So thought I'd let you guys know.
Thank you, Mr. Bernardo. We will check that.
Our next speaker is someone on the phone with the last number 7743. I've asked them to unmute. Oh, I think there they go.
Yeah, hi, it's Ann Paulsman. I was just going to tell you the same thing. I couldn't get the Zoom to work. So I think you should give people a little time to figure out how to log on. Because I only figured it out by calling, but I think probably a lot of people just don't know what to do. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Paulson.
Our next speaker is Miss Roberta Phillips.
Hi, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so yes, I had the same problem. So anybody that's listening in, if you go to the regular city council meeting, one at 7 o'clock, and click on the Zoom link there, you can get onto the meeting. That's what I had to figure out. The only thing I have to say about the housing element is I really think that we ought to give Nick Zorns and the staff an opportunity to respond to HCD with their letter. And I'm confident that he will do a really good job. After it's approved, then we can have discussions about zoning and what happens in different zones, et cetera, and how we're going to achieve our numbers. But I just wanted to say that, you know, we're very short staffed. We started with John Biggs and then Laura Simpson and Nick Zorns. And I think staff is really running as fast as they can. And we're all hoping that the response goes back, you know, before it's due, so that we do have the 3 years to discuss the, you know, the zoning to reach our arena numbers. Thank you.
Mayor, I have one more person that has raised their hand since we called public comment.
Please go ahead.
Our next speaker is identified as Rich. Rich, are you there? I see him unmuted. Now he's muted. And now he's unmuted. Rich, are you there? I see his mic toggling on and off.
Okay, maybe we were there. You got me now?
I got you now. Yes, sir.
Okay, Richard Roach calling. I had a problem with the Zoom also, but I used the webinar ID and then with the passcode in the you provided, and I got right on. So thank you very much. Sorry for the confusion there.
Did you want to make a comment, Mr. Roach?
Nope, just let you know because the other two people had commented about difficulty getting on.
Okay.
Thank you.
City Attorney, can we suspend public comment, have council meeting, discuss this, and then if other people manage to find their way on, go back to further comment?
Yes, you could, but people shouldn't speak twice, but
Sure,
yeah.
sure. But that being the case, we will now suspend public comment for the purposes of the city clerk. And I'll start with Councilmember Lee Eng, who indicated that she had a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I had a few questions. Thank you, Director Zorns, again, for all your hard work on your report regarding the housing element and trying to address all the questions that we may have. As you know, I am concerned about, I posed a couple questions about self-certification and ensuring that that will mean if we self-certify, does that then mean that we don't have, it will prevent builder's remedy? Could you answer that, please?
So thank you, Councilmember Lee. So we're not really in the process of doing a self-certification. That's not really an option that's available any longer. There was a pilot program approximately 15 years ago in San Diego, in what's called SANDAG. So that's the equivalent to what we refer to as ABAG. So that's the local COG or Council of Governments. They were given that ability, like I said, about approximately 15 years ago, because they are actually the smallest COG in the state, since they only cover the San Diego County area. As a part of that pilot program, there was kind of the option and test case to see if self-certification was really worth it, as well as also helping bridge the gap, because at that time, HCD had approximately 30 staff. They since have now quadrupled their numbers and now are doing the certification process and reviews themselves. That's what's been in place for the 5th cycle and also the 6th cycle. So self-certification really isn't an option any longer, as it was just a test case. Now, however, it is the city's due diligence for us to make a meaningful charge in the development of our own housing element and adopt something that we believe is in substantial conformance with California housing law. What we initially proposed to HCD was something that we felt strongly was going to meet a lot of the necessary requirements pursuant to state law. However, we knew that there was going to be some work just based on the history of what has always been commonly given back to each jurisdiction throughout the state. So that's where we're at right now. What we'll end up doing throughout the rest of the course of, let's say, essentially this next 60 days, is we will work to revise the document to be in substantial compliance with state law, and as best as we possibly think will meet the requirements of each individual essentially comment that was provided to us by HCD in their findings letter from November 10th. So in theory, we will do our due diligence, which could look like a self-certification, but truly that common nomenclature that used to be available to individual jurisdictions is not something that's legally accessible any longer.
Okay, thank you for that. I have a few more questions, if you don't mind.
Just a moment. City Attorney, did you have something else you wanted to?
She brought up builder's remedies and how self-certification would affect builder's remedies or not, and I think those are mutually exclusive. So if we don't have a certified housing element and someone comes forward with a project, we may have a problem with Housing Accountability Act. But Builder's Remedy has always been in the Housing Accountability Act for many, many years. But at this point, we're focusing on getting the housing element certified by HCD in a timely manner, so we won't be faced with that. I know some jurisdictions will probably have some problems, but those are usually the larger jurisdictions with lots of projects in the pipeline.
Okay. Thank you. So my next question is, as you know, we're doing the NMD route and not the, oh, can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, somehow it went blank. So I'm concerned that we're not going to get a substantially compliant housing element without the submittal of the EIR. And so what is the process of including partial EIR if needed with our submission, and as well as, can you identify how many housing elements have been passed with doing the NMD route?
So I think, as I have previously advised the council, the housing element update will be a project subject to CEQA, and how CEQA is applied is there will be an initial study to determine if it's going to be exempt or a neg deck, a mitigated neg deck, or EIR. Our consultants worked with staff. They did the initial study and they determined that a mitigated neg deck was going to be adequate for this housing element update. So we're going down that route. We determined that an EIR was not needed at this time, and I'll let the council know and the public know when we go to implement the housing elements goals, policies, and plans. At that time, there will be future and more CEQA done on more of a case-by-case project specific. So it's not, the CEQA isn't going to determine if our housing element is in substantial compliance with the housing law. That's a housing element issue. CEQA, and are we being in substantial compliance with the CEQA laws? I believe we are, and we have an adequate mitigated neg deck. And we have not heard any comments that our mitigated neg deck is inadequate. And so right now, I believe we have substantial evidence in the record that our mitigated neg deck is sufficient. And I'll turn it over to Nick. You have all the data on who else is doing NDs, MNDs, or so.
Yeah, and so just to piggyback off of what Jolie has already noted to the council is that we are not a jurisdiction, one of our own, that is doing MND for the process. There's multiple different factors that are taken into account when you decide on which environmental document is appropriate to be utilized for the purposes of CEQA. I will want to reiterate something that I've talked about previously is the housing element is one document, and whatever environmental document, whether or not that is an ND negative declaration, an MND, a mitigated negative declaration, or an EIR, an environmental impact report, those are two independent documents that run in tandem and speak to one another. However, they're independent of themselves in regards to what analysis has to be done and determined to be compliant with law. So that's inevitably why an initial study is what determines the outcome of which environmental document is going to make it compliant under CEQA. I did go ahead earlier today and looked at OPR, which is the Office of Planning and Research. It's the governor's office at the state level, where any CEQA documents that are completed as of 2020 all have to be filed with the Office of Planning and Research for the state. So everyone has access to this information as well. Since September of 2020, essentially when the 6th cycle or planning period began, 31 jurisdictions have actually adopted a negative declaration for their housing element. So meaning that they propose no mitigation to be inclusive in their project. And then since October of 2020, 10 jurisdictions have done a mitigated negative declaration. So obviously, you know, there's approximately 400 and some change jurisdictions throughout the state of California. So we're trending at being a part of the 10% that has done something other than an EIR. But again, that is dependent upon what your findings are from an initial study.
So out of the 10 jurisdictions that have done the NMD, are any of their housing elements approved?
I would have to go back and specifically look at each individual one with the state. Again, though, the environmental document runs independent in regards to what the analysis and findings are. You have to do it as a part of CEQA law because it's an amendment to a general plan element. However, it's not something that HCD themselves has purview over.
Okay. So in the response back from HCD, they kind of identified some lack of outreach. So are you going to continue to conduct outreach? And if so, how do we do so for a broader sector of the community? And is that, you know, do you feel what more needs to be done? Please identify it.
So one thing that I have always stated in regards to all housing elements that I have worked on in multiple different jurisdictions, this being the fourth one in the last 3 years that I've personally touched. Beyond just the housing element, planning is inherently tied to public participation and engagement. There is no fundamental practice of planning without that. So I believe that the housing element, although not to have a statement in conflict with what the mayor said earlier, it's not, the outreach is not going to stop once we adopt the housing element. Outreach is going to be ongoing for the entire planning period, because with the adoption of the housing element, our programs then need further analysis and development and actually to make their way into our general plan or into our zoning code or specific plans. So there's going to be an ongoing process and communication with the community in order to be able to understand exactly what's needed. This is just the document that's going to be our base layer saying these are the minimum things that we're going to do in order to accomplish our RENA for the city. So in regards to the outreach specifically that's going to be, you know, done is I refer kind of some of the notations that I have in the report that was shared with the city council and the public online is on November 18th, shortly just after a week after we received our comment letter from HCD, I took a 2-hour small group meeting with the Los Altos Affordable Housing Alliance group to understand their concerns as well as to kind of further vet out what we need to kind of do to accomplish our housing element. In the coming weeks on December 7th, I'll be meeting with the Chamber of Commerce because they have reached out and contacted me directly about wanting me to come and speak to their group. They're interested in hearing more. Again, on December 16th, I will be meeting with the Community Coalition here in Los Altos. They also have expressed interest of wanting to meet further and discuss. And then already I have 2 tentative additional dates for December to meet with the League of Women Voters that have also expressed interest in wanting to meet with me directly, as well as have made contact and put on my calendar for tomorrow to meet with Dignity Moves, which is a Bay Area nonprofit. So there's a lot of working parts of things that have already been accomplished in just the 2 weeks since receiving the letter from HCD. So I would only hope that this somewhat shows due diligence and effort in regards to communicating effectively with the public, those that are of interest, as well as looking for additional parties of interest to be able to make sure that we are effectively planning correctly and listening to what needs to be done in the community from different economic sectors, as well as different sectors of the community, whether or not it's the business community, as well as folks that just live and enjoy being Los Altoans.
Okay, yeah, because my concern is making sure we get a broader sector of input from the community and not just heavily input from those with a downtown interest. My next question was also in the letter, they identified that there was 500, Los Altos had approved 587 units that is in our pipeline. And it also identified that we can't count them unless they're in a certain planning period. Can you help me understand which one of the 570 units are going to be 587 units are going to be counted and in this sixth cycle arena? And help me identify that planning period or understand that better.
Yeah, so the planning period begins as of January 31st, 2023. So we have done a great effort this last 7 months since my arrival here at the city to finish out projects that have already been ongoing, and we have entitled those. So what runs in tandem also, in addition to all the other things with the housing element, is our APR, the annual progress report. So that is something that's actually where we end up reporting out to HCD annually on what units we have entitled, what units we have issued building permits for, as well as then the final checkbox, which is which units we have issued certificates of occupancy for. So there's going to be essentially a sliding scale. We just obviously made a huge dent in the fifth cycle by what building permits we issued. However, that scale always is somewhat sliding because really HCD is going to look at when we also then issue building permits and then also when we issue certificates of occupancy. One of the main reasons why they have created a multi-page Excel spreadsheet that's very fun to fill out annually because it changes is they've started to realize each year more data that they want to collect from each jurisdiction, which helps paint the understanding and story of where in the process are developments getting held up. And so we will essentially be reporting out for the fifth cycle that we've entitled nearly 600 units. However, then we're going to, in the sixth cycle, be reporting that we've issued building permits and then obviously inevitably certificates of occupancy. So that will also further help to account towards our RENA.
So you're saying how many will be accounted to? So that just all applied to our fifth cycle and none on our sixth cycle, are you saying?
No, so it's going to actually kind of apply to both, but you don't really get full credit for it until you actually have a unit constructed.
Okay, so then out of the majority of the 587, looks like it should apply to the sixth cycle, correct?
Correct, but there's going to be, some lag or jumps depending on which, any of our ones that we've already entitled previously before. We've already issued building permits under the fifth cycle, but then we'll be finished with certificates of occupancy in the sixth cycle. So really, until you get to that finish line, that's then really when they're going to say, wow, this is the progress that you made in your planning period.
Okay. So, so another thing that I noticed in going through the report, we show the revised versions of our report. And we need to show the revised versions of our reports on the website as identified in the comments by HCD. Is there a list of revisions or a way to identify a list of revisions? Because I didn't see it, so perhaps I missed it. You can, if so, you can point it out to me. And if there isn't, I was wondering if it can be helpful if we can provide a list of revisions, like a table or appendix where we show the footnotes or changes in the back of the report, or perhaps a red line And then as you take the finished product, you can eliminate the red lines when you submit to HCD. Is there a way to make it easier for the viewing public?
Yeah, so that's actually something that myself and the housing element consultant team is working on right now, which is the revisions to the draft housing element in order to address all of the comments that has been provided by HCD. And that obviously has to go in through track changes into the actual living document of the housing element. But then we actually prescriptively have a table that we just created that's how we'll also show and indicate to HCD, this is how we address your comments, and actually give very direct focus on that. This is where that information is living in the housing element to make sure that things are not missed.
Okay, so you'll make that available for
Yeah.
us as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor. Those are my questions.
Okay. Let me take a pause here. City Clerk, do we have any other members of the public who have joined us?
Yes, we've had quite a few folks that showed up since we've closed public comment.
Okay, well, we suspended it. We didn't actually close it because we knew we would have the possibility to come back to it. If it's okay with my colleagues, what I'd like to do is go back and take the other public comment, and I've got 3 other heads nodding. So City Clerk, with our apologies for the difficulties people may have had, would you please re-invite whoever's online to raise their hand if they'd like to make a public comment?
Yes, Mayor. I'd also want to make a quick comment. We have corrected the link on the agenda, so no future folks will be having the same issue. But those that are participating virtually, if you'd like to comment, please raise your hand and we will call on you. I see no hands being raised, Mayor. We'll give them a couple more seconds.
A little bit, a few more seconds.
We just got one hand raised.
Why don't we go ahead and call on that person, please, City Clerk?
Yes, our speaker is by the name Nancy.
Hello.
Hello.
So I just got in, so I haven't heard any of the meeting, and I think I just caught that maybe the link was wrong, and that's why I couldn't get in.
That's correct, Nancy.
Okay, so I didn't hear anything that's been said, so I feel kind of weird talking now because usually I talk to things that have been said. So I guess I have one question. So my understanding from previous meetings is that this is just a working document. We would have more time to give input, and we shouldn't stress about things that we were had great concerns about within the document and the zoning and things. And then, but I thought I just heard someone say, because I was on the iPad really quick trying to get in where I could actually see something, that this is like the element is like the minimum things that are going to be done. Did I hear that wrong? And that's my question, I guess.
Thank you.
We have no others with their hands raised, Madam Mayor.
For the benefit of the folks and because of the difficulty in getting in, let me just reiterate that we're taking comment tonight. The forward plan is that the Planning Commission will hear this on January 5th, which is another opportunity for public comment, and the City Council will take action hear further comment and take action potentially January 10th and or 24th. So, and in between, comments can always be submitted. They need not be submitted only during meetings. In fact, we've had several pieces of very comprehensive correspondence within the last few days. So that's basically the process. So if you have comments on the existing draft, I would urge you to submit them in writing as soon as possible for the benefit of the staff.
And would it be correct also to say, Director Zorn, that through the website, altos.housing.org, right? That there is a way to submit feedback there as well. Right.
That's
I
actually the
directly-
preferred way.
The preferred way.
Yeah, and I directly see all public comments to make sure that everything's compiled correctly. But then I also do just want to also make note is that the public review for the MND does officially be released, yes, as of tomorrow, for the 30-day public comment period. So that is also the official window for the MND review for public comment to be received, yes.
So again, these are independent tracks of independent documents, but the timing very definitely overlaps. Okay, City Clerk, do we have anyone else who wanted to comment that you see?
No, Madam Mayor, no one else has their hand raised.
Okay, then I think I will close public comment and come back now to my colleagues if anyone has further questions or comments. Go ahead, Councilmember Flecker.
Thank you. And Mr. Zorns, I don't know if you plan to make a presentation. He doesn't. Okay. Because I have other questions, but I wanted to pick up on something Councilmember Liang asked, because I've also been asked about this January 31st, 2023 data and what it really represents. What is legally due by January 31st, 2023? And there are a lot of terms being thrown out: substantial compliance, adoption by the city, submitting an updated draft, having HCD approved. And so the follow-up question to that is, what is due January 31st? And is what Los Altos is doing by January 31st sufficient to stop the builder's remedy being triggered? So for example, if what we're legally required to do is submit a substantially compliant HEU, who is making that determination that it's substantially compliant when we submit it January 31st? Because if it's not, does that leave it open for the builder's remedy to be triggered? So are we only required by January 31st to submit or update a draft, not knowing if it's going to get approved, and that's sufficient?
We as a city need to adopt formally as a council a meaningful document that we believe complies with housing law. So the reason why I say that way is to kind of somewhat take away the legal jargon of saying substantial compliance or conformance. Both are used interchangeably by HCD reviewers. Is essentially what that means is that we could adopt something as a council and say, this is what we're putting forward, and we've made all good faith efforts to comply with everything that has been put into this 10-page comment letter, which I can tell you is actually not a significant letter. I will reiterate that. This being the fourth one, this is probably the nicest letter I've received. But with that being said, is if we were to just completely say, no, we're not going to do these things, we can almost guarantee we're not going to receive a substantial compliance letter from HCD. That in turn really means is we've done everything ahead of time, we've adopted on time, and we've submitted this document. Now they could give us a substantial compliance letter that then states, hey, you are essentially 90% there. You got a few more tweaks that we are requiring you to do before we give you what they used to call certification.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really use that term any longer. But that is really kind of that weird nuances. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, flawless, and no element is when you go for your second submittal usually. However, it's you need to make the good faith effort to really put everything forward that they're asking for and not neglect it, or not just say, we're not gonna do it.
Councilmember, can I ask one quick follow-up?
You can really do a quick follow-up. So let's use that 90% scenario you just mentioned. So let's say.
And I do just want to mention, that's not a number that anybody's ever said. I'm just, in my head, I'm like, all right, you're an A student. You did a good job, guys.
So yes, we make a good faith effort. We address all the issues raised in the HCD letter. We submit it, we adopt it as a council, and we submit it by January 31st. But HCD receives it. And when they review it, they determine that it only 90% substantially complies or conforms, right, with the different government code sections and legal requirements. Does that open a window then for a developer, for example, to say, wait a minute, they're not fully in substantial compliance. They've not met all the legal requirements, to open the door for a builder's remedy? Or the fact that we submitted something in good faith that we thought substantially complied or conformed, addressed all the issues, is that what we're required to do regardless if when HCD gets it after January 31st, we're still missing a couple of things?
Historically, in years past, builder's remedy has not come into effect with other jurisdictions if they have only a few line items left to address. I'm saying historically because they have changed their tune most recently with the city of San Francisco and been a little bit more direct and stern with their interpretation of the law. They commonly, and I say they as HCD is commonly referred to it as a grace period in years past, not in writing, in verbal communication during preliminary conferences with them. They have taken that out of their vocabulary now. So it's a little bit of a change in tone in regard to how that state agency is reviewing things. I also want to remind the council, partly one of the reasons why that is kind of their way of responding to jurisdictions is they now have full legal authority to be an enforcement agency on their own. Prior to this last year, essentially, they always had to funnel everything through the Attorney General's office. That didn't really work. The courts are very tied up. That delays things. The enforcement unit themselves of HCD can do the legal enforcement action against jurisdictions without having to go to a judge, essentially. And also, I do want to alert the council is that they also now have a division of the department that is a proactive enforcement. It is no longer a responsive or reactive. It is, they are diligently looking at jurisdictions' land use authority and regulations and seeing how they are applying it and if it is consistent with housing law or not.
Thank you. So my follow-up question is, if they've taken the word certification away, whenever it is that we get the final something, what is it called?
Good job. I mean, it's interesting, I'll be totally honest, is that
I realize not a lot of these have been issued this year, even
Right.
for down south.
right, is it's hard to say, to be frank, because in verbal communications with them, they still use the term certification.
Approved.
Yeah, I mean, it's an approved document, or honestly, the term that's just constantly being used is in substantial compliance. So again, that's one of the reasons why I said this all the way back this summer in June was this is a binding contract with the state, but it's a living document. So that means is that if we ever fall out of compliance, it used to be, yep, you're certified, we're done until the planning cycle's over. That enforcement unit now opens the door where they can have constant oversight and communication and enforcement against an agency.
So we don't know what the form and title of the operating final document is going to be called.
It's an approved housing element that we are approving and that they are saying is in substantial compliance with
So
housing
we're
law.
going to hopefully get a letter from them at some point that actually uses that phraseology, substantial compliance.
Mhm.
And the city attorney's nodding her head too. So you agree? Yay. Okay, so
ask a follow-up question?
absolutely.
This is one too.
This is nuances.
Yeah,
Really
right.
add. I appreciate that my colleagues care enough to ask.
So I think what you made clear is that by January 31st, the city council has to adopt its 6th cycle housing element. And at that point, my understanding is that is our housing element. That's our contract with the state. The programs that are in there, we need to get moving on. Now, we're still waiting for HCD to say substantial compliance, great job. But isn't there a 120-day window from January 31st? So if HCD came back 6 days after we adopt the housing element and said, you still got to tweak 1 or 2 things, we're still in that 120-day window, right? And we wouldn't have to worry about a builder's remedy so long as we make those final tweaks. No?
Nope. We are hearing the same things from our various sources. As soon as we get past January 31.
All right, so the
Until we get
the
something
staff
back from
report says
HCD.
if the city is not found to be in substantial compliance within 120 days. So
Nobody knows.
It actually
Bottom
says
line.
conformance.
So I could have just actually provided you with the hyperlink of where that exact verbatim language lives. I love reciting things that are on HCD's website. That sentence is verbatim on their website for the building blocks of a housing element. So this is what they are saying. That's where I'm saying is that their enforcement unit now is changing their tone in regards to what they view the builder's remedy and when it becomes in effect. So there's a lot of debate with city attorneys across the state in regards to when the builder's remedy comes into effect, or this old school, what we refer to as the grace period for 120 days. What I would say though, to further clarify, is that HED's first review of a draft submittal is 90 days. So we've now completed our 90-day review. When we submit at the end of January in 2023, that will then begin a 60-day comment period or review period for HCD to assess our revised element and if it is in substantial compliance with law.
okay, so where does the 120 days come in then?
So realistically, with what we were tracking to try and do before the recent letter to San Francisco, was that we were going to essentially have a revised document that we were going to submit to HCD prior to the council taking final action and adopting the element. That we were going to send it again sometime in January. Don't quote me on that exact date. I don't remember the old dates because they're off the table. We're moving forward. And so we were going to submit them to give another cursory 60-day review, and then essentially have another bite of the apple to see exactly did we do what they said or not. If we didn't, then we'd have enough wiggle room to then make those last ditch revisions to the document and then formally adopt it and provide it to them, and then be able to have another 60-day review. And then at that time, we would, in my opinion, most likely be deemed 100% complete with a compliant housing element.
Or just give us a second. The 120 periods of 1%.
Well, so yeah, so the one thing that does come into play is that there's, if you are deemed to be in substantial compliance within 120 days after the statutory due date, so that pushes us to May of next year. So even if we have a little bit more tweaks to do, I will be working steadfast to fix that document. If we then resubmit it and then we are deemed to be in compliance, we then now have 3 years to do our rezoning program instead of 1 year.
And there's nothing to do with builder's remedy. That's.
No, but there's so many different moving parts that really builder's remedy for our city is not. I will confirm the builder's remedy is something that most jurisdictions of a truly metropolitan type of an atmosphere, LA, San Francisco, Oakland, those are the jurisdictions, in my personal professional opinion, that should be concerned about builder's remedy. Those are folks that are people that probably have been deemed incomplete or actually denied projects that under builder's remedy now have essentially a substantially compliant housing project that they can submit essentially next day. We don't really have projects like that. Folks would have to work pretty, they'd have to put in quite a bit of design work to be able to submit truly something that would really actually be plausible, you know, to be able to be applied under builder's remedy. And again, there is the legal argument that we've talked about quite a bit since the letter to San Francisco was released, is that there still is a legal challenge to that and different interpretation by HCD in regards to that we do have a document that we have tried to substantially comply with. I'm confident that we are making those due diligent efforts to be able to have a compliant element.
Yeah, and just to add, under Housing Accountability Act, you know how you have to make those super findings to deny a project. And, you know, but one of the findings is the project is inconsistent with both the zoning ordinance and the land use designation specified in any general plan element. But if the city can't make that finding if it has not adopted a housing element in substantial compliance with law, and that's where the builder's remedy is going to come in. And, you know, you might remember from way back when we had a Housing Accountability Act lawsuit, and it was not in compliance with the specific objective findings or objective standards in the Loyola Corner specific plan. We got sued. We won because we did deny it based on an objective standards in that specific plan that was adopted. So, you know, it's those findings, and we would not be able to make a finding that it's in substantial compliance with the general plan if we don't have a housing element in substantial compliance with the state law. So that's very nuanced, but Nick said there's going to be some jurisdictions out there that have projects that are probably just, you know, waiting in the wings to go forward.
And I think the bigger question is going to arise once we have a substantially compliant housing element and we haven't yet implemented programs. And we have something come up under Housing Accountability Act, because at that point, if it's compliant with what we said in our letter, but we haven't yet changed our zoning code and general plan, then, you know, they can make an assertion, well, we're complying with the new stuff, so you have to approve it, or we're complying with the old stuff, so you have to approve it, and where are you going to be? And I don't expect an answer on that one from the city attorney tonight. But I think that's where the bigger jeopardy is for the city.
One of the last things I'm gonna at least just state so that it's on the record is pursuant to section 65585 subsection F of the government code. State law provides that a city or county may adopt its housing element with its own findings that explain why the housing element is substantially compliant with state law. That is what we would do as a part of our normal process with a resolution approved by the council. So if we had to make an extremely long resolution with multiple whereases that we normally wouldn't maybe have to do, just because we don't have that letter with an assertion from HCD saying in substantial compliance, we will be able to further make our justification in the element that we justify or that we adopt.
Councilmember Flagger, anything further?
No.
Councilmember Weiner, Paul, you have anything further?
No, not at this time.
And the vice mayor.
Actually, Councilmember Weinberg asked one of the question I was going to ask, but so I don't have my highlighted document on this computer with me, but I thought I saw somewhere that HCD pointed out that they didn't like our objective standards and that we weren't, and I'm sorry, I can't find the highlighted part because it's on my other document. So there was some objection to our objective standards. And if they don't like objective standards, does that mean that we have no standards whatsoever, or what? I didn't quite understand, and I'm sorry I can't point you to where that was. Can anyone, do you recall?
It's Loyola Corners specific plan.
Oh, okay.
You're referring to.
Okay.
We know we need to update.
Okay, so we feel that we can address that, because I thought it was weird if we can't actually apply objective standard, what do we apply?
I also I also suspect that they might have misused the
Okay.
terminology and meant to say a subject.
Okay.
Based on the document that they were overarchingly referring to, inherently as a subjectively written document that really has no teeth in land use.
Okay, good. That makes more sense. And then the other thing I was going to say, as I read through the commentary, the impression I got, because you've done such a great job so far, that you can just take this, and actually you walked out of the room and you didn't hear that one of our public commenters said this, that you could take this and make many of the changes within your group and consultation. So my question to you, and of course we'd see it, I'm not saying we're not going to see it, but what do you need from us? Or is this mostly things that you can go away and propose changes? Are there anything, because our programs really had a lot of the policy questions, they sort of reflected that. What do you need from us? Or do you have what you need to come forward with the draft that will go to Planning Commission?
So one thing I want to clarify, because the reason why I wrote the report the way that I did was a lot of it is a regurgitation and an interpretation of what HCD's findings letter is, as well as it's me being able to expand on the preliminary consultation that myself, the housing element consultant, and the assistant city attorney were able to have with HCD directly, the two main reviewers that then was undersigned by one of the senior analysts for the housing accountability unit. So there's kind of those three different combinations of what my letter or report ends up kind of providing to the council. Really, if there's a strong objection to some of the responses or bullets rather in my report, I would urge the council to bring that up now. The programs are the programs, those are in the housing element because we are required by law to do something that's pretty much in the realm of what was proposed. However, we need to make stronger commitment to each individual program, which was identified specifically by HCD. There's some of them that does not really need council debate on. They were pretty prescriptive, is that I need to bust out 4 ordinances by the end of next year. They're not really hard ones to do. They're pretty much regurgitations from jurisdiction to jurisdiction for specific things for land use control. But there are some things that might, be of the purview of the council that you might have a special interest or comment on in regards to something that you'd like to be expanded on in the housing element, that I would say this is the opportunity to potentially bring that up to me. I can look over my notes just to see if there's anything that stands out to me that I need to ask for some specific clarifying direction from the council. However, ultimately, a lot of this it's reading between the lines of having done this being the 4th one is knowing what HC is expecting. Because I know realistically, Los Altos doesn't want to get sued and we don't want to lose our overall land use authority, which is unfortunately the carrot that HCD dangles when they send these letters. So I can definitely do that. And then if anybody wants to bring something up while I look that over really quick, I can.
I'll just bring up, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mayor.
I'll bring up one thing, and also a resource for you. We have a former planning commissioner who was on our planning commission for a total of 16 years. Yeah, Phoebe Bresick, and has a great deal of knowledge, both of the city, of past housing elements, also the zoning issues on the CT zone, and why we ended up with height and not stories. And I know that HCD is asking for both a stories and height. I would recommend that you talk with her with respect to the issues that they've raised, just because she is a tremendous resource. And I would comment that given we have exceeded our nominal zoned density in both that zone and First Street, at the heights we have, I would be curious how and why and what benefit there would be to increasing the nominal height if we're already, I mean, we could increase the density and probably get what we need without increasing the height, because one of the issues that we have run into, especially on First Street, more so I think than on the CT zone, is that our heights were so generous with respect to our density that we were getting a lot of very large units where we would prefer to have a better mix of units. And so I think I'm not sure that HCD has really considered getting smaller units and how we make that happen when they make the comment to increase the height and add story information. So I think that we've got to put all three of those factors together, and Phoebe is really, really good at that. Not to say you're not, I'm just telling you that with respect to the history of the city and how some things have happened.
Did she volunteer herself, or are you
No,
volunteering?
I have not talked with her, but I think we've always found that.
Well, she's an architect also.
She's an architect, yeah, but she's not done projects, she's not done development projects like that in town, so she does not have conflicts of interest. She's just extremely knowledgeable, and so no, I have not told her that I was going to volunteer her for this. Because I wanted to raise the issue separately, and I think the issue matters separately.
Read about it in the paper.
Yeah, but I also would like to offer a resource at the same time that I raise an issue. Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. So to the vice mayor's question about what you need from us. I reviewed the different programs, and I know I brought it up at one of our previous meetings or study sessions about the vagueness around the timeline, right? We'll say by fourth quarter of 2025 or 2027. And I noticed in HCD's letter, as you said, for some things that were more prescriptive, saying you need to get this done now. And so is this the time for us to look at the other programs where HCD didn't tell us by when we need to get those done, to give you direction on updating the timeline? For example, there are several programs that have fourth quarter 2025. And even though it's by those dates, I would like to see some of those programs started earlier. And I don't know if that's something we need to include in the housing element update so that they see a more clear timeline about when we plan to achieve certain things or start certain things. So is that feedback you would want from us tonight? And is that necessary for the January 31st submission?
I'm going to ask the follow-up with that. And that is, if HCD didn't comment on it, we can always plan to do it faster. Are we better off to just go with what we've been given, and then once we're submitted and you've laid out a plan for the entire implementation, have those matters considered?
So there's a couple moving parts. So I really don't like to have to talk about or do revisions to programs that HCD didn't mention, in my personal and professional opinion. I think the housing elements indicatively are required to have a sunset date, not a sunrise. If the council were to include sunrises in the programs, you, by virtue of doing that, are going to be committing staff resources as well as financial resources for additional consultant help for the next 8 years. So I just want to at least speak to that. This is a commitment that we are doing all of these programs over the next 8 years. Otherwise, we do have enforcement action that will inevitably come. But providing sunrise dates on all of these, or some of them, would really very much tie us to that, as this is, for better or for worse, is a legal binding contract with the Department of Housing and Community Development. So I would not prefer to put sunrises in there. I do think from like my draft element, kind of thoughts on a lot of the programs is that bumping them up by a year, multiple of them, I think, in my opinion, passes, the lab test with HCD. I think anything greater than that is kind of unrealistic just based on not the argument of not having staff resources. They don't, I'll be frank with you, they don't want to hear that. They think it is as an excuse. They don't want to hear that we don't have the funding. Again, it's an excuse to them. However, what they fundamentally want is justifiable timelines in regards to, rezoning has to happen first before you can do these things. A CEQA analysis does not take 6 weeks. It's more like a minimum of 6 months, depending on what type of documentation you're doing. And that's if you're not having to have an iterative process. So realistically, some of them it just depends on the way staggering of certain things end up having to be for each individual jurisdiction. But I think realistically, timeline-wise, we're pretty spot on with a lot of our programs. I think they reiterated fundamentals of some that we just need to do. I agree, and I planned on just getting them out of the way anyways. But we'll heighten the timelines on the ones that they specifically called out for sure, at least at minimum by a year, if not sooner. But again, I would also like to remind the council is that you at any point have the ability to direct staff to initiate one of the programs sooner once we're already in the process of doing our housing element implementation. This is also something that we'll be reminded. I will not say all jurisdictions do this, but in the APR, so the annual progress report, the one to OPR is very rosy. The one to HCD is very specific. It's very prescriptive, and it does go down the list of every single program. Did you do it or not, essentially? And if you didn't do it and you didn't do it on time, why not? And if you did do it, what's the success of it? You're constantly reporting to it. So I would urge this council, as well as any future ones that over the next 8 years during the planning cycle, is that that's the opportunity to evaluate, hey, have we started cooking this, or why are we getting so down to the last 6 months on this one? Is it really something we can knock out? If not, all right, then this is how we're going to allocate and be able to make sure that we're staying on top of what we need to do in order to accomplish our contract.
I appreciate what you said, Mr. Zorns, and I understand for purposes of the housing element. So what I'm hearing is we'll get to January 31st, and this may be a question for the city manager. So for programs, because a lot of them have by fourth quarter 2025, if a council member or council members want to bring forward a program and ask, do we have the resources to start working on this program? We would bring that up in the future agenda items. Is that where you would like us to propose moving forward with certain
I think
programs?
absolutely, Councilmember Flagger. I think council probably will want to move some programs forward and prioritize them over others.
What's next? Yeah, so while we're on the programs, this is just kind of a hypothetical, but you outlined because HCD highlighted program 1D housing on church-owned sites, and they want that 1 year sooner than initially proposed, so no later than December 2025. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, we thought that there was a more impactful program that could really, because my personal opinion, not necessarily supported by fact, but that might not be the fastest bang to our housing buck. And so if we saw another program that we wanted to accelerate and we justified that would again need to be before January 31st, because we wouldn't want to do it after we're committed, I assume, to our certified or whatever it is, housing element. So can we trade it and can we make a justification for doing that? Or is it just make more sense to say, okay, you want the church parking lot?
I mean, you can try to make the negotiation. I will tell you from being at a previous jurisdiction that, for better or for worse, pretty much had concierge level service from HCD because we were being made of an example of one of the 2 jurisdictions that were reported to the Attorney General's office.
No, you're not there.
Now it's a learning experience. That's why I know what to advise you all on what to expect. So for better or for worse is that I would recommend not playing with fire on that particular topic. I do also fundamentally think that the church-owned sites and the requirements for doing the expansion of allowing that type of development to potentially occur on those sites, it's not a cumbersome process. There's other processes in here that are pretty prescriptive in regards to the legal requirements that come along with it, especially because of CEQA. So I do think that inevitably that particular program really isn't that hard for us to kind of really kind of just assign and kind of get it done pretty quickly. But you're right, it also doesn't account for a large share of our housing resources that we're intending on developing out during the planning period. Again, though, HCD does want to fundamentally try to make sure that we are doing something that opens up the door to be able to actually accomplish the development of potential housing in the planning period versus just checking the box. That's kind of the process that they're wanting everyone to get away from. So the earlier that the rezones or changes of certain standards will then help influence additional development to occur, that's where they're kind of wanting those heightened timelines to be able to be accomplished earlier on.
Right. So it's a long-term productivity strategy versus short. Right. Got it.
And I think just to answer the overarching question is, all the programs will be done by the date, right? The HCD says they'll be done by. Council's going to find some of the programs we have an opportunity that we didn't know was there, so we'll want to move it forward. We'll find some of the programs are working better at achieving the goals and we thought there were, so maybe we want to enhance those. So we want to keep the deadlines in line with what HCD is recommending and complete them by them, knowing that council in time is going to move some forward and prioritize them. So our preference would be, let's put deadlines in that we know HCD thinks are reasonable and acceptable, and then let's council apply that at our level to meet the objectives and vision of the city.
If there's nothing further,
I just have two, one point and then just one final question. And so, Mr. Zorns, for the record, I just want to make sure that you feel comfortable with all the feedback we receive from HCD, all the analysis that needs to take place, updating schedules, everything that needs to happen. And January 31st, we'll be able to do that. And I'm sure you're familiar with the planning collaborative, the Santa Clara County Planning Collaborative, who I know has offered its services to all city staff in Santa Clara County. So do you feel comfortable that it's a 10-page letter? And I agree with you. I think we all reacted feeling, okay, this could have been worse. We're very grateful. But you feel comfortable that we'll be able to address all the issues raised by HCD?
Yes, I do. I think there's a lot of so further just to touch on so that everyone knows is the HCD letter in multiple points does reference things that need to essentially just be further clarified or tied to essentially that it's in the document. But they kind of make it say that if we can't easily find it, then we just can't find it. And that's where they kind of inform you those things, little nuggets in their consultation with you. And or we actually have to say, oh no, we actually do have that information, and we did do that. However, our preliminary phone call with them only happened 2 weeks in advance of receiving our letter. It usually happens a minimum 30 days prior to receiving your findings letter. So they're very backlogged because of just a very big region that's submitting right now, as well as the biggest just came before ABAG, which was the SCAG region. And they already are still reviewing everybody's, even though they're long past 30 days. So there's so many different things as well that you know, we were hopeful that we would get a little bit more comments. We could make a couple tweaks and then kind of give them an initial like revise, like no, hey, this is actually where some of these answers are in the document already. It probably would have condensed our letter a little bit even further because some of the data is actually already in there. It's just, it wasn't as relatably understandable or they weren't able to find it readily. So they want us to further kind of create that, the document chain essentially so that they can find the information, not just them, but also the entire community as a whole.
And then my last question, Mr. Zorn, requires the annual outreach to satisfy the AFFH. And I'm just curious, what are some of the things that we plan to do annually to do that kind of outreach?
So one, fundamentally, and it's something that will come formally when we do our fee study, which is a part of a program that will be included, because that is essentially reading between 3 different comments from HCD, that will be a way for us to be able to fund an additional position. The city is in desperate need of having a housing manager. We already accounted for that and discussed that over the summer when we talked about the housing element, and it was included as a quote unquote potential that we'll add that position. That person I would foresee essentially programming them into doing annual outreach with the public in multiple different formats. There is not a one size fits all. You can do electronic surveys, you can do mailer surveys, different levels of economic sectors, as well as the variety of different demographics need to be addressed in different ways. It's very similar to the way that children learn, or even us in this room, is some people are visual, some people are audible. A lot of different resources need to be deployed in order to make sure that we're actually accomplishing that outreach. Affirmatively furthering fair housing truly goes down to the basis of going to a variety of different areas of the city and finding those folks that actually need to be able to be made to have a voice. If we were to say do a robust effort and say we went door to door, never heard of anybody doing that, but that you really kind of like put it out there and we ended up getting no feedback from folks, that might be somewhat of a different conversation, but we've never done that before. So really we're going to have to do a vast variety of digital type of surveys, snail mail type of surveys, tabling in certain areas of the community, also some areas that are not in the community, but folks that actually might already live here, or that they come and work here. So I've even seen in some of the larger cities that some folks, they don't necessarily table, but they go and do walk-bys during when they know that there's peak ridership at certain bus stops, and ask 5 high-level questions about, hey, where do you live, or hey, where do you work? And just try to get some of that type of data collection that ends up starting to help build a repository for us to be able to further kind of program and develop how we're going to continue to address those needs of the community.
Okay, 2 resources, CFA, Community Services Agency, and then of course the Chamber of Commerce, Kim. Thank you.
Okay. All right, then I will, let's see. 6:47. I will close this study session at 6:47. Thank you, City Clerk, and we will have a break and be back here. And for anyone that's online, you can stay online because the same link that you successfully are will be what we use for our regular City Council meeting that begins at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Clerk, are we ready to go?
Yes, we are, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will call to order this regular meeting of the Los Altos City Council on Tuesday, November 29th at 7 p.m. Would you please call roll and establish quorum?
Yes, members of the council, if you are here, please indicate so by saying aye or here. Councilmember Flagger.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee Ang.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Meadows.
Here.
Thank you. And Mayor Enander.
Here.
Thank you. You do have a quorum. No one is absent tonight.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. And it looks like we have our scouts here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please introduce our scouts tonight?
Yes, Mayor. Tonight we have Bree and Emery Nazarene with Troop 60477 that will be leading us on the Pledge of Allegiance. Ladies, I'll turn it over to you.
We have a flag here, so we're all going to stand. And when you are ready, ladies, you go right ahead.
Put your right hand over your heart and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So which of you is Bree? Raise your hand. And the other, your sister is Emery?
She's my twin.
She's your twin. I would never have known. So what grade are you two in school?
Second.
Second.
Yeah, second.
Second? Oh, you agree on that, right?
You cut off, Mayor. I don't think they heard you.
Okay. How long have you both been scouts?
3 years.
3 years. Wow. Well, you really got the pledge down. I know that for sure. You enjoy your year at school, your upcoming holidays, and thank you very much for being with us tonight. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, there was no closed session tonight, so we have nothing to report out. Do we have any requests to change the order of the agenda? Seeing none. City Clerk will move to public comments on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the chamber who would like to make a comment on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, City Clerk, would you make an inquiry of our people online?
Yes, Mayor. Those of you attending virtually, if you'd like to address this council on items not on the agenda tonight, this is the time to do so. Please indicate so by raising your hand, and that's the button in the middle of your screen. Or I believe it's #9 if you're the person on the phone. Mayor, I see no one with their hands raised at the moment.
Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds.
Maybe there's a holiday party we haven't been invited to.
That motivation. Okay, there being no request to speak on items not on the agenda, we'll move to the consent calendar. Is there anything that anyone would like to remove from the consent calendar? Seeing none, nothing from any members of the public who are present. Is there any member of the public that's on virtually who would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? Then I'll take a motion for the consent items. Vice Mayor?
I move that we approve the consent calendar, which includes items 1 through 6.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg?
Second.
Councilmember Weinberg seconds the Vice Mayor's motion to approve the consent calendar as presented, items 1 through 6. Go ahead.
Members of the council, if you are in favor of the motion, please indicate so by answering in the affirmative. Councilmember Lee Ang.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Fliger.
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Meadows.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Enander.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Moving now to public hearings. Our next item is item 7. I will open the public hearing on approving use of park in lieu funds. Is Mr. Hernandez wanting to make a presentation on this matter or someone else? City Manager?
He's online.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Everybody can hear me clearly, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this item is just requesting approval to use park and lieu funds for shade structures in over the playgrounds at McKinsey Park and the community center to make them more usable during the summer months when sun hits them. Many times they get so hot that kids can't play on them. These two parks were chosen for immediate shade structures because of our evaluation and through public input on the temperature of those playgrounds. Playgrounds in the future or other additional playgrounds will be evaluated going forward as we hopefully get to replacing some of them will happen immediately because, well, in the near future as we replace them. So that's the item that's in front of us in this public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Are there any questions from members of the council? Okay, then we'll move to public comment. Is there anyone in the chamber?
Mayor, I had a quick question, if you don't mind. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I couldn't raise my hand fast enough. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez, and thanks for the report. Quick question. So if we purchase these shade structures, are we limited to utilizing the same vendor when we go back out to replace the equipment, or how does that work?
That's a very good question, Councilmember Liang. Yes, the play structure or the shade structures, there's two of them, and two of them they're separate. They're different styles. So the shade structure that is going to be over the community center playground is a standalone. It has 4 posts. And I believe I included the diagrams of them. Yeah, with those posts, the shade structure, any kind of replacement of the playground structure will be limited by the height of those posts. So that's the limitation on those. The playground there, though, is a 2 to 5 year old playground. So we don't anticipate that any replacement would be higher than the 13 feet that it already is, or 11 feet. So that can be utilized even through a replacement of that playground. The playground at McKinsey, the shade structure of the style that is at the community center was not recommended there because of the size of the area that it would have to cover. So it's a structure that's attached to the existing posts that are on the playground. So those posts will be changed out and the shade structure will be attached to the extension of those posts. That can be reused if the playground ages out, and we will definitely be restricted to either a style, if not the actual brand of playground, if we wanted to reuse that shade structure. So that is correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions? Okay. City Clerk, would you inquire if there's anyone online virtually that would have a comment on this item?
Yes, Mayor, those of you attending virtually, if you'd like to comment on this item, please indicate so by raising your hand.
I asked inside and didn't see any hands. Oh, I didn't hear that. Sorry. I'll come back to you. Okay.
Mayor, I see one person with their hand raised.
Okay, we'll take online, and now I have someone in the chamber who wants to speak. We'll take our online speaker first.
Okay. Our speaker joining us virtually is Nancy.
Hi, I just have one question. I know I'm more supposed to make comments, but I was really taken aback when I saw how much this cost, $92,000. I was curious how much that is per square foot. It seems more expensive than putting a roof on a house. And I was wondering also how long that this is expected to last. So that's all I had to ask is what, gosh, why does it cost so much? I don't think that the areas covered is all that big. Thank you.
Ms. Valadez, did you want to speak?
Mayor, if staff could answer the question, I'd be curious to know too.
We'll deal with that once we've completed our public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. The only comment I have to make is because the diagram doesn't really show sizes for Mackenzie, I'm aware of the shade issue or the lack of shade issue at the park. My concern with overhead shade structures on the slides, however, is that oftentimes the slides protrude well beyond the shade unless the shade is southerly of the slide descent. Because the drawing shows that it's directly overhead, the place where the kids rise the highest before they take off, it's not clear that that the slides will be protected by the shade during the hottest part of the day. So it's more of just of a question, or maybe a more detailed diagram. I'm not sure what would solve it, but that was my concern. Thank you. I am a Parks and Rec commissioner, but I'm speaking as a member of the public. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Valadez.
So Mr. Hernandez, I think the public has raised a couple of good questions and our council members would like to know the answers as well. Can you answer those, please?
Yes. Yes, I can, Madam Mayor. Yes. So the first question being the cost that was that's in front of us today in this request, it was actually derived from a competitive bid process. So we chose the style of the shade structures that we felt best suited the playgrounds that we're focusing on. However, it just happened to be that those were the lowest proposals actually. So and one shade company actually couldn't even make them in California for I forgot exactly what reason, but yeah, that is the lowest proposal actually, and that from our understanding that's the going rate for commercial shade structures of this sort. So so I think that answers the first question. The second one is the coverage of the two shade structures. We already understand that it will not cover the entire slide area for the entire part of the day. This is to reduce the time that the slide is in the sun, because the more time that it spends in the sun, the hotter it's going to be. So so yes, that is true. It still will be exposed at points of the day, but this is to reduce that exposure to the sun, to reduce the temperature. So that's the goal for having the shade structures. But we understand that based on as the sun's movement, we'd have to basically enclose the whole area, which isn't realistic of the shade structure.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to close public comments. Any further discussion by my colleagues?
No, Mayor, I'm ready to make the motion.
Okay, Councilmember Flagger.
I move that we authorize the city manager or his designee to purchase and install shade structures over the playgrounds at Los Altos Community Center and Mackenzie Park in the amount not to exceed $92,198.09 to the lowest responsible proposal from Ross Recreation Equipment.
And do we have a second? Vice Mayor Meadows will second Councilmember Flagger's motion. City Clerk?
Members of the council, if you're in favor with the motion in front of you, please indicate so by saying aye, yes, or anything in the affirmative. Councilmember Lee Eng.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Fliger.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Meadows.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Enander.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll now move to our next public hearing for item number 8. This is a public hearing on adopting an ordinance, adopting by reference the 2022 California Building Codes with amendments. And it's got a long title that we will repeat when we move to the motion.
I'm not making the motion tonight.
It's so well, I think you ought to, you practiced it once already. This presumes, of course, that the discussion proceeds in that direction. There's no presumption of that. But we do have a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. I believe that you are not, are you going to make any presentation or are we not going to make we're not going to make a presentation?
I just wanted to save time for you
Thank
to have
you.
to introduce that.
We did hear this matter previously at a hearing and then scheduled this public hearing at our prior meeting. We scheduled this public hearing. So at this time, unless there are questions from any of my colleagues, I will go immediately to public comment.
I do have a question for Mr. Zorns. It's related, even though somewhat tangential. But at the last meeting, you had mentioned that sometime in the near future, you would bring back the proposed updates to the REACH codes based on what the Environmental Commission had recommended, I think, back in September. And I was curious whether or not you had a date. And like, do you know if this is another 3 weeks, a month, 2 months? Do you have an idea of when you'll be bringing those back to council?
I'm actually gonna look over to Director Fairman. Since our staff is actually the one that's directly working on the REACH codes more directly.
Thank you, Director Fairman, for joining us.
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor Nander and council members. I'm the Fairman, Director of the Environmental Services and Utilities Department. So my staff is working on the various items. There were 4 action items that we're required to do. And to answer your question, the short answer to your question is not gonna be 3 weeks. We're gonna be more, so we're working on the cost analysis, the local cost analysis that's in the works, and the other items as well. So I don't have a firm date yet, but we're working on those items. Thank you.
Councilmember Fliger, we are targeting the first quarter of next year.
I have a quick question for Director Fairman in a clarification in regards to REACH codes. Does that apply to the Mawendo codes as well?
That's a separate item. We are aware that in Windows, it's the top 3 priorities that City Council asked the staff to work on. So my staff is starting to look into Windows as well. So we're focusing on priority 1, 2, and then 3. So we're starting to work on that as well. Thank you.
So just to let everyone know, the Mawendo is the REACH codes for water. Thank you, Director Fairman.
Okay. And if we have other future agenda item questions, let's hold those, please. Returning to the matter at hand. Do we have anyone in the chamber who would like to speak on this matter? I don't see anyone. City Clerk, would you inquire of our virtual attendees?
Yes, anyone joining us virtually, if you'd like to address the council on item number 8 on the agenda, now is the time, and use the raise hand feature to be called upon. Mayor, I see no one with their hands raised.
Okay, there being no people in the chamber or participating virtually who wish to comment on this item. I will close the public comment and bring it back to council. Is there anyone who wants to comment on this matter or discuss this matter? Do I have a brave soul who is willing to make the motion and read the title?
I'll take a turn.
Vice Mayor, you are welcome.
She said she wouldn't do it.
I will second it.
Oh, well. I figured,
Three of you have water, one doesn't. You're gonna need it.
so, and I don't often make motions, so this is making up for that. So, I'm going to move that we adopt and waive further reading of the ordinance, and we're going to adopt an ordinance amending Title 12, Buildings and Construction of the Los Altos Municipal Code, sections 12.04, 12.08, 12.10, 12.12, 12.16, 12.20, 12.22, 12.24, 12.26, 12.30, 12.32, 12.42, and 12.68, adopting by reference the 2022 California Administrative Code published by the International Code Council, the 2022 California Building Code published by the International Code Council, 2022 California Residential Code published by the International Code Council. Take a breath. 2022 California Plumbing Code published by the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials. 2022 California Mechanical Code published by the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials. 2022 California Electrical Code published by the National Fire Protection Agency. 2022 California Energy Code published by the International Code Council. 2022 California Fire Code published by the International Code Council. 2022 California Green Building Standards Code published by the International Code Council. 2022 California Existing Building Code published by the International Code Council. 2022 California Historical Building Code published by the International Code Council. And 2022 California Reference Standards Code published by the International Code Council.
I'll second the motion, Mayor.
And Councilmember Flagger seconds the motion. City Clerk?
Members of the council, if you are in favor of the motion perfectly articulated by Vice Mayor Meadows, please indicate so by answering in the affirmative. Councilmember Flagger.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee Ang.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Meadows.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Enander.
Yes.
Thank you all. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We will move now to discussion items. Item number 9, City of Los Altos flag raising policy. And do we have a staff presentation, Mr. Carneseca?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. Let me go ahead, and my presentation is very brief. It really just reiterates what was in the agenda report. There are 2 options for consideration because currently the city of Los Altos does not have a policy in place. The first option is to formalize a policy that will allow city council to review all flag raising requests as well as bring their own forward to city council for review. And the second is to prohibit the use of flagpoles for any flag other than the United States, the state of California, and then the city of Los Altos. Either of those options have a resolution presented to you tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Carneseca. Do any of my colleagues have questions for Mr. Carneseca? There being none, we will take public comment on this item. Is there anyone in the chamber who wishes to comment on this item?
You do.
Go ahead, please approach the podium. We have one member of the public, Mr. City Clerk.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeanine Valadez. I'm a member of the Parks and Rec Commission, but I'm speaking as a member of the public. You probably are all aware about the mayhem that's going on across the country about flag raising. So I'm here to express an opinion that I believe the council should allow flags that are beyond the scope of California, the United States, and the city of Los Altos on its flagpoles by, the resolution that's being proposed. And if you wish to come up with fee structures and other requirements that groups might have to follow, but I think that there are many celebrations that happen throughout the United States where public agencies might put honorarium types of flags up. So it would require probably more distinct specification if you pursue a more open policy. The easy way out would be to just limit it to the federal, state, and city flag. But you're definitely, I think, will lose the enrichment that comes with a greater variety. But I understand, I can see both sides of the story. I just hope that you lean towards a more open policy that is backed up with specific requirements that groups or people would have to meet, including fees. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have any members of the public participating virtually who would like to speak on this item?
Those of you attending virtually, please raise your hand so that we can take account and call upon you to speak on this item. Mayor, we are holding at 2 hands raised at the time.
We'll give our speakers 3 minutes. City Clerk, call them in the order that you have them.
We'll do. Our first speaker will be Nancy.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Thank you. I have actually thoughts, not just questions about this item. The flag represents a lot. I mean, I grew up learning the Pledge of Allegiance, learning our history, and all that our flag stood for. I know people have fought in wars. My father fought in World War II, and my parents knew many, many people who died fighting for our country and for our flag. My dad one day when I was younger pulled out some medals out of the safety deposit box, 2 medals. He said, one's for you, one's for your sister. And I said, Dad, what did you do for those? I didn't really know. And he said, he looked at me kind of dumbfounded. I said, well, like there's the Purple Heart or whatever. I said, why did you get a medal? And he goes, for 5, I did a medal you got for 5 missions. And I said, so? And he said, just to be alive for 5 missions was a big deal. And that's what the medals were for, because so many people died. The flag stands for a lot, for our government, our state, our country, and our city. It's all part of what we're doing. And as our forefathers said, our country is it's a work in progress. It's not a finished product. So I feel the flags are very important in the government. I'm going to quote something out of a television show because I find it meaningful, even though it was just out of a television show. That's a pretty powerful symbol, the flag. We rally around it and we celebrate it. We fight under it. We cover our dead heroes with it. I guess I feel like that should be set apart from events and special interests and celebration flags. That's a whole different category. We can celebrate those things by advertising. We can do sandwich boards. There can be banners. We can even bring a flag to an event. There's lots of ways to do those celebrations. I just don't feel that they're appropriate to put in with our government flags. And as I sat and look at the flags behind you in council, you're working for our government and to try to make our city a better place. And I just don't see an event flag or a special interest flag fitting in with those flags. So I hope that you will vote to stick for our flags, to stick with the state, country, and city flags and not have other random flags or special flags flying with them. Thank you.
You?
Our next speaker is Roberta Phillips.
Hi, everyone. So I did think a lot about this also, and what Nancy just said, I really have to agree with her. My concern is that that any restrictions that you put on will be subjective. And somebody could say this is political, and somebody else could say it's not political. Somebody could say it's religious, and somebody else could say it's not religious. I would prefer that you err with caution. And, you know, when Sally and Jonathan ran for office, they said they did not want any additional lawsuits brought to the city. I think that we need to respect the American flag, the flag of California, and the flag of the city, and try to avoid lawsuits where somebody could say, well, this person was rejected, this person was accepted, and it's, you know, so I would prefer to err on the side of caution, and as Nancy said, to respect the flags, because these are government flags, and you know, people can advertise special events in many, many other ways, you know, like banners or sandwich boards or advertising in the newspaper, etc. So I do hope that you keep it as it is basically now, with, you know, without a policy. I understand why you want a policy, but I hope that the policy is that you just keep it with the American flag, the California flag, and the city flag if we have one. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor, I have no more virtual public speakers.
Okay, then I'll bring it back to council. And is there any one of my colleagues who wants to open the discussion?
I was going to volunteer Councilmember Weinberg because I believe it's on the agenda because you brought it up. So I would like to hear what your thoughts are, if you're willing.
Absolutely, I am. I am in favor of adopting a policy that allows flag raising above and beyond just the American flag, the California flag, and the city flag. I think that this council has already established that we are willing to move forward with government speech and take positions. We did that a month ago with respect to Proposition 1. So I think that that horse is already out of the barn. I also think that it's important for the city to take a leadership position within the community and to recognize when the community wants to commemorate very important historical events, current social movements. I just think that we are doing our community entirely a disservice by not allowing, say, a rainbow flag during Gay Pride Month or the Juneteenth flag. I think I would be proud for the council to approve raising the POW flag when it's appropriate. I think that there are a lot of movements and issues in which it is appropriate for this council to take a position and under the doctrine of government speech, move forward with raising a flag for these very important issues. I think that the proposed policy is well crafted. Under the policy, I don't think we have to worry about someone raising the Union Jack. It's not the Union Jack, the Confederate flag. Another flag having to do with hate. No political flags are going to go up. So pro this Democrat, pro that Republican, that all of that is covered in the proposed policy. And I'm happy to see that. There's one clarification that was made in staff comments or staff responses to council questions. I know that the entire public didn't see it, but one thing that concerned me in the proposed policy was that a referral for government speech from the council itself to the council had to be made by the entire council. And that sounded to me like all 5 council members had to vote in favor of bringing forward a motion for council speech. And it's my understanding from having read the staff responses today that that's not the case. It's only a simple majority. And for those people I think who aren't quite following what I'm saying, the policy proposes that if the council itself wants to adopt council speech, there has to be a motion, there has to be an item agendized, and then there has to be a motion to approve that agenda item. And so it wouldn't happen at one meeting. There would be a meeting where one council member says, I move that we adopt as government speech, recognizing Gay Pride Month and that we raise the rainbow flag for this period of time. If 3 members of the council are in favor of that, then it would come before the council probably at the next meeting, maybe on consent, maybe not. And then at that second meeting, there would be a vote as to whether or not to adopt that government speech. And I think that's what would happen for any party that wants to bring forward a proposal for government speech, whether it's from a commission or a member of the public. That's what I think.
I have 2 follow-up questions, Mayor. So just picking up on the process, City Attorney Houston, where it would come to council for council to make the decision, majority or more, whether or not they want to adopt that particular representation of the flag as its government speech. Once a council adopts that, does it now become the adopted speech of the city, or each year the council, whoever sits on the council, would have to adopt it for the city to raise the flag?
It would have to be per application. Yes, I would say that would be the safest course of action. So the council again would have to adopt it as its own speech. So
Each council, so even if it's the same flag that was approved by a council, any future council would have to go through these steps again.
yes, that's my understanding of it.
And if a council were to adopt a speech, and we're using speech to define what the flag represents as government speech, does that council have to lay out the criteria by which they're relying on to adopt this speech? And I'll follow up with that. So let's say a council adopts a flag and they express on the record they're adopting the flag because of XYZ. And then another group or commission comes forward with another flag, and they're saying this meets the same 3 reasons when you adopted that other flag last year. Are we bound, would the council be bound by the reasons by which they relied on in adopting a flag?
I'd have to look at that, but it really shouldn't be. It should always be on a case-by-case basis. And that's why you're taking that extra step to adopt it as the city's speech, as government speech.
Right.
Because what we're doing is we're trying to not open our flagpoles to become a public forum where anybody and everybody could raise a flag. And so, and we would have to review it and be very consistent, but I think we would have to review it each year. So, yeah.
And then my last question, just to stay away from the political speech that Councilmember Weinberg mentioned, if a council were to adopt, again, the flag representing the speech, and there's another flag that's viewed as taking an opposing position to the flag that was adopted, would a future council be challenged or put in a position where, because they adopted one as its government speech, they're now bound to adopt the other?
No. It's by adopting it as government speech, you can deny flags, and you can, because it's your public, it's your property, it's your public forum, your forum, and you want to keep it controlled. Just like our website is our forum. We don't let people advertise. We don't open that up so anybody can get onto our website. And it would be the same thing as the flag policy.
Thank you.
I have a clarifying question as to the question that was asked by Councilmember Fliger.
Go ahead.
So, Councilmember Fliger asked a great question about if someone came with another flag with the same clarifying reasons why their flag should be adopted as well. and it was denied, would that open us up to litigation?
It would depend. And, I mean, we'd have to look at the criteria and the reasons for it. I mean, I can't just say what we're trying to do is say, we need criteria, we need to adopt it as our speech. And then that will keep it from becoming a public forum. And again, as we've stated, the safest route here to avoid any sort of litigation would be just the three flags mentioned, the state, the US flag, and the city flag. That would be the most conservative approach. But many cities have flag policies, but I would just, we'd have to look at it. But just because a certain type of flag was raised doesn't mean we have to approve a similar flag. So we have a lot of discretion, and that's why we have to adopt it as government speech.
So then when the process in the future going forward, when you do adopt a flag for government speech, is it 2 agenda items? Because you're gonna, one, try to adopt it as the city speech, and then as a secondary item, then the flag? Or is it going to be wrapped as one agenda item in the future going forward? And I'm not clear on the timeline, so.
My understanding is that it'd be treated no differently than a future agenda item.
So if Mr. Karnasek wants to address that, if not, I'm happy to.
Councilmember Ling, I think, and this is where I'd want the city attorney to confirm, but I believe we would review the application, or the application would come in, staff would prepare the resolution for city council, or city council would make the motion, and then the next meeting it would come forward as an item with the resolution identifying the flag as the government speech. So it would only come forward once as the resolution saying this flag is officially considered government speech. Here are the reasons, and the flag will be flown from this date to this date. And then city council can determine whether they would like to approve or deny that application if it was external, or approve or deny the request from within the city council.
So just to follow up, that means that the organization makes an application. Staff would do a bunch of work, or whatever work is needed to prepare a resolution. And then that would get scheduled and put on the agenda. How? Just because somebody made an application, staff would then put it on the agenda, so there wouldn't be any decision to put it on the agenda by the council. Is that correct?
It could come up as a future agenda item, but it also could be someone comes to the city with an application, and then the application would have to come to council to be approved.
Right, but putting it, who would have the authority to put that on the agenda? Is that something that would be at the discretion of the mayor and the city manager? Is that something that, by virtue of the fact that there was an application, there's a right to then have it on the agenda? I'm unclear about the exact process here still. And thank you for asking the question.
I believe if the application meets the criteria, then it would reach the council to make a decision, as long as it met the threshold for a decision made by city council. So as long as it meets that non-political and all of that criteria within the policy, it would come to city council.
So if I have another clarifying question, Mayor, if that's okay. If we have 2 competing or 2 applications at the same time, if both of them will come to city council, or is it staff that will be making the determination which one qualifies to come forward?
All applications would come forward to city council, and city council could make the determination as to which one they would like to have representative as government speech on the flagpole.
Yeah. So the policy actually I mean, it can come up as a future agenda item, but it says the city council may consider authorizing the display of a flag pursuant to this policy by referral of the mayor, by referral of the entire council, I mean, a majority of the council, on motion of any council member made during the time reserved at a regular council meetings for discussion of future agenda items, or at the recommendation of a commission of the city. The city council may also consider authorizing the display of a flag on an application of a resident or community group if they fill out the application form to be created by the city manager or designee, a full color picture. And then it would go to council that way. So there's different ways to.
Right, it was the term may consider that I think is tripping me up.
Yeah, it says may also consider.
May also consider means is different from what I heard. I think I heard Mr. Carnesecca say, which is if someone applies, it's going to come forward.
So, Mayor, that it's correct. The staff wouldn't act as a gatekeeper. We treat this like how we used to do fee waiver policies. If you meet the criteria in the guidelines, then we would bring it forward to council if it came from a resident.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I can follow up on that point.
I think Councilmember Liang had another question.
So my question is directly related to that person, but okay, going back to it. Go ahead, Councilmember Liang.
Go ahead, Councilmember Liang.
No, go ahead, Councilmember Fliger, because you opened the questioning and then we kind of like got clarifying. So go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember Liang. Mr. England, I just wanted to follow up on that point about staff being the gatekeeper. Because above the paragraph that the city attorney just read, where it lists the 8 things as the circumstances under which we would not be able to authorize display of a flag. Are you saying as part of staff's gatekeeper role, they're gonna do the analysis to see if any of these 8 applies?
So I think we would bring these forward to council if they met the criteria, as which in this case is essentially completing the form, and then council is going to determine if that request is violating any of these 8.
So it will be council that would have to determine if the flag represents a group that, you know, endorses or expresses a preference for any religious sect. Like, we would have to do that analysis. Staff wouldn't do that as part of their gatekeeper role.
Under this policy, council would have to do that, yes. The city council would be the appropriate body to determine if this is government speech that it would like displayed on its property.
I just think some of these, and we can do it as part of the discussion, I think it'll be very difficult for council to make some of these determinations.
This is the discussion, right?
That's the discussion.
But
But I don't,
yeah.
what Councilmember Lee, what's
Right,
your
right.
question? They can
Right.
discuss.
Go ahead, Councilmember Liang.
I think that when you talk about it would be up for a minimum of a week, we don't have a clear information as to how long one can even exceed, or I'm just concerned that how do we make sure, because you state that making sure that it doesn't advocate discrimination or intolerance against individuals. Everyone's perception is different. And, you know, what one might be viewed as a sacred symbol, another might take it and view it as perhaps something that may cause fear in someone. So I'm just concerned as to how staff will, it sounds like then staff will not be making any clear considerations as to what is or isn't meeting these criteria, and everything will just come forward to council, correct?
So
We can change that, Councilmember Lee, and as part of our discussion.
that's what I said. It's correct right now. How Councilmember Liang described it is correct. Council of course, could ask staff to make a recommendations, we bring it forward. I mean, you're seeing staff, be hesitant because it's government speech, it's free speech, it's on the city's property, you're the city council. You can change this policy and craft it any way that meets your needs. We are happy to make a recommendation as an example as it comes forward, but ultimately, I do think it should be a city council that's making the decision.
Councilmember Liang, did you have any other comments at this time?
No, I'll save it for comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, I don't know that there's much more to say. I think we need some expression of how people want to go. Councilmember Weinberg, I think, was pretty clear on what his inclination is.
So can I then say, I was saving my, because we seem to be doing questions, right? No, discussion, let me, so in theory, I mean, there's probably a lot of flags that we would all, or mostly all, support and wouldn't be difficult, but some of these could be very difficult, which is, I think, what we've kind of been poking around the edges of. So one of the questions in the Q&A was about, so this is the flag policy that we don't currently have, so we refuse to have one that says, yes, we'll do it, and one that says, no, we won't. But we have, there's lots of avenues for free speech. And certainly, so there was a question in Q&A about the banners that fly around Las Vegas. So let's just use the one on Main Street, for example. And the staff was kind enough to provide a link to that banner policy, which I must admit I didn't go in and read. But thank you nonetheless. Maybe I'll do that tonight when I'm having trouble getting to sleep after this meeting. So in theory, frankly, if we put a flag of anything, you know, up at City Hall, it doesn't actually get as much visibility as something on Main Street, just for example, or out by Chef Chu's, where there's another banner location, and I know there's some throughout town. So, I mean, is that another way to look at, again, without having looked at those guidelines? I mean, I personally would support, you know, rainbow flags in the appropriate time, and couldn't those actually be in some of the banner locations? And would that be, and I don't know what the rules are because I didn't click into the link, but couldn't we be achieving what we wanted to do without sort of going specifically to flagpoles and the flag policy? So, because it just seems like really complicated. There's, again, I use the rainbow flag. To me, that one's not complicated, but if our community could make something complicated, this would certainly be able to make this complicated. And so maybe there's a way to actually make it less complicated and look at our banner policy, which would do even more in terms of, you know, feeling of support for those who want to fly certain flags or banners or whatever. So anyway, that's just my.
So Vice Mayor Meadows, to respond to that, the banner policy is mostly to advertise events that are taking place in town. So certainly we could apply this policy to our banner policy, but then the same rules on the flag would apply to the banner. So it wouldn't actually change. We'd still be adopting government speech.
But the banners aren't government, the banner locations aren't necessarily government speech. They're events that can be any nonprofit, anyone who pays the fee. Again, I don't know what the restrictions are because I didn't click in. If an organization, not the city council, but if an organization wants to pay for that banner space and put a pride flag up, I don't know if that's currently allowed.
It's currently putting a pride flag up would not be allowed unless it was in connection, event open to the public, non-denominational, held within the city limits, and all are welcome. So you'll start seeing the theme that was similar to what we brought forward for the fee policy.
The fee, okay.
Where it gets a little more complex is you'll see in the flag raising policy, for example, it says it can't show preference to any religious group. But currently, we define sometimes religious activities as cultural activities, right? So how would we parse the difference in that? So we would say that if we're applying the banner policy, then it would for the most part, have to be event specific for something that's happening in town. So it'd be a little different than commemorating an event that didn't have something associated with it.
Okay.
I'll join in the discussion. So, you know, I do support having a flag policy, because I do believe as a city, if there's speech or positions we support, one way for us to do it as a city and as leaders in the community is to raise the flag. I am concerned about the slippery slope, and that's why I think we're all cringing, because you know, their flags, I'm sure we all would say, raise that flag tomorrow morning, right? But what does this open the door to? And I do think the 8 reasons, the circumstances listed here could address the concerns we have, but I'm also not comfortable with city council determining these 8 things, whether or not it does these things. And so I am willing to support having a flag policy, but I would want to make revisions where, you know, and I heard Mr. England where, yes, I think the ultimate decision should be made by council. It is our speech. But I do think some of this analysis and determination should be done at the staff level before they bring it to us. Because they have the resources, right? I may go to one website and I don't know the source of that website and find something that says, oh, this group is anti this or pro that. And so my preference would be to have staff do the due diligence, do the research and analysis under these 8 circumstances and bring it forward to us so that we can make an educated decision on whether or not we raise the flag, because I do think these 8 things are very important. I would not want to support raising a flag if it fell under any of these circumstances. And I also would change the policy that gives referral by the mayor. I think there should be a simple majority or more. The mayor by him or herself should not be able to bring this forward. So those are the 2 changes that I would make. I would suggest making for me to support this policy, because I am concerned. Like, we are here as a council, we know each other. 10 years from now, we may have a different council, and 3 of the 5 on that council may bring forward a flag. And if they're the ones left to determine if that flag falls under these 8, depending on, you know, how much they want to raise that flag, they could go, no, no, no. You know, it's not anti this or pro that if they get a flag raised in our community. So that is my big concern about having these 8 things come to us to make the determination. I would prefer to have staff handle that at the staff level and raise the concerns that they find from credible sources.
Just briefly responding to Nisa, I agree that staff should be empowered to make some basic decisions. And I was a little surprised when I heard staff say they weren't going to make. I mean, if someone wants to raise a flag that says "buy my product," I mean that facially violates number 1. Yeah. And I would hope that staff would not say, "Well, it's up to council. We got to bring this forward," because that would be a waste of everyone's time, including the person who wants the flag raised. We trust staff to determine whether a building application meets objective standards. I think we can trust staff to determine whether or not a flag passes any of the top 4 or not the bottom 8 standards as well. And where there's a gray area, of course, staff will bring it to us. I also am a little fearful that we're creating a slippery slope that doesn't actually exist. I mean, I don't think that if we adopt this policy, there's going to be hordes of people banging on the doors of City Hall with applications for anything under the sun. And frankly, if that happened, we can always go back and amend or eliminate the policy. And we can do that at any time, right? I'm also not persuaded by the argument that who knows what a council in 10 years is going to do, because that's up to the council in 10 years. I mean, none of us are going to be on this council then. And whoever is on the council at that time will have the opportunity to make their own proclamations, or they can adopt their own speech. And for that matter, movements, the public perception of movements changes over time. So there may be something that we, as a body of 5 right now, support, that 10 years from now, we'll look back on and say, our perception has changed. I wouldn't do that today. So I'm not persuaded by the argument that someone might do something in the future that we don't like, because that's true for everything this council does. Everything that this council considers can be looked at in a different way by a future council, and that's their prerogative, and frankly, it's their obligation to use their best judgment given the times. I think that there are some flags that the council would like to adopt as government speech, and I think we should have the opportunity to do that. I don't think that we are really groundbreaking on this. I mean, we have sister communities, sister agencies that raise the rainbow flag, that raise the Juneteenth flag, that raise other flags. And yes, they're potentially exposed to liability. Anyone can always file a lawsuit, but we as a council should have an opportunity to adopt our government speech. And that government speech doesn't just mean we want to raise this particular flag. An exercise of government speech could be, we don't want to raise that flag. We have that opportunity, and it's not a question of, do we have to be fair that we're allowing yes, so we have to allow no? Not at all. It's just like, it's no different than when this council passed a resolution in support of Proposition 1. We didn't thereafter have to adopt a resolution opposing Proposition 1. We took a position, and that's the position that we wanted to put forward. And I see that the flag raising policy exactly the same way. In terms of whether or not the mayor can make the referral, I don't have a problem with it, but I certainly would not hold that up as a key issue.
So Mayor, do I get a chance to comment too?
Please, go ahead.
So, I am concerned, and like everyone else who said they're concerned there may be openings for a slippery slope. I think this has been some very trying and difficult times. I think people are highly sensitive lately, and I think it creates potential for controversy or potential litigation. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about whether you're viewing one celebration and giving it as a political speech over another, because one celebration might be like, if someone comes in and go, oh, I want to celebrate Lunar New Year, are you not going to recognize that? I mean, our flagpole should be sacred for government, our government flags. I don't think it should be for sale. I think this opens it up for, like I said, concern for taking time away for important work that we need to do. We just went through our housing element. We said how important it is we need to focus. All our meetings coming forward, we have specific critical timelines in which we need to focus on a housing element. If we get something that comes before us that becomes controversial, we all know how much time controversy has taken it in the past. And I just don't think it's appropriate right now. And I just think that we should keep our focus on the United States, state, and city flags. But I also think by adding the addition, by just adding all other governments or city speech, it takes away from what our flags are. And I was just concerned about there will be too many flags and the focus is not on what our government flags really truly represent to most people. So, I'm personally want to keep it with the American, state, and city flags. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. I was wanting to agree with Vice Mayor Meadows and hoping that where you were headed with banners as an option was going to be a viable option. But I've now dissuaded that it's not an equivalency that would work. I actually don't accept the premise that because we took a position on Proposition 1, that that's a precedent for compelling us to start using our opportunity for government speech and flags. And similarly, I'm sorry to say, Councilmember Weinberger, but we have an entire department with planning expertise that deals with objective standards. We don't have a staff that has training, expertise, and a professional competence in looking at these areas. So again, I think that's a false equivalency. And I'm really concerned about things that are the edge cases. And I'm going to go back to what Vice Mayor Meadows said. We would probably all of us agree on many, but some, and that's the some that becomes problematic. And I think we have cautions from the city attorney in that regard. I also want to point out that flags as a way of signaling things is not universal among cultures. And in a community that is increasingly diverse culturally, flags could become something that is emblematic for a group and by inference, intimidating to others. And so I think for all of those reasons, I would prefer and would vote to retain a policy or to establish a policy, and I appreciate staff work on this because we need a policy that would limit us to the 3 flags that are here behind me. If it is a Councilmember Liang has been clear on her position, I'm pretty clear on mine. I think we know some of how the rest of you feel on things you would want changed from this point. If you would like a further discussion to try and agree on an option that the 3 of you can support, then that's the discussion I think we should go forward with at this time.
So I'll repeat what I said earlier. I'm willing to support a policy, but I feel very strongly about having staff, with all due respect to the mayor's point about our resources, making the determination about numbers 1 through 8, as opposed to bringing applications or requests forward to council and then having that body do that analysis. I do not feel comfortable as a council member and as a resident when I'm no longer on council, having council members determine whether or not a certain group advocates discrimination or intolerance against individuals. And I know it's under the basis of a specific code section, but sometimes it's not that easy for council members to make that determination. So unless Mr. England has concerns about staff doing that as part of their gatekeeping role, I strongly prefer to have staff handle that step of the process. And I would also remove giving any mayor the authority to bring it forward without at least 2 other council members supporting it.
So, Councilmember Flagger, just as a point of clarity, I think staff is again happy to make a recommendation. We're happy to say these are the 8 points. Here's what we think. For my comfort level, are you saying that we would say they don't meet one and then we bring it forward and council formally denies it, or are you saying that staff would say we don't think it meets it, therefore the application's denied at the staff level?
So, for example, if majority 3 or more council members as part of the future agenda item discussion requests that a flag be brought forward, and expect staff then to present to us at that future meeting your findings under these 8, because then we have a policy and we have to comply with our policy. And if you present it to us, unless we have information showing otherwise, then as council, we should say it doesn't meet our policy requirements. So we won't adopt it.
So I think staff is happy to make a recommendation. I may have misunderstood earlier. I was thinking staff was making a denial, but if staff's making a recommendation to council, I think we're happy to do that.
Why is everyone looking at me?
Because if there's going to be a motion, it's going to come from one of the 3 of you.
Well, Well, I'll just say I'm really torn on this. I mean, I see the benefit, but I also see the benefit both ways. You know, but I don't see it as detracting from, so some of the arguments were about, you know, putting something else with the flag, detracts from the flags. That is not, I think what it exemplifies is this country, this state, this city support, you know, whatever the government speech would be. I would rather there were a different avenue, because I think there are a lot of avenues, but that's not what we're exploring tonight. And I think some of the instances aren't going to be, I mean, they'll be brought forward, not necessarily by council members, but by community organizations or whatever. And I think that they should have options that don't involve our flagpoles, because again, the banner policy seems to me, if it's just really event specific, then maybe there's, I mean, we've seen people rent out community spaces and put stuff up during their events and things like that. But I guess I'm willing to give it a try. So I do agree with what Councilmember Fliger is suggesting, caveat wise. So I think that's important. I don't know. Yes.
I'm just gonna add one thing, because I don't really want to bring something back potentially, or having thought processes for banners or temporary signage. And Gabe, this is a nod to where we both have worked before. Read the town of Gilbert, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed content-based signage and the scrutiny thereof. So us commingling like something that truly should live in a government speech standalone issue versus something that we then start applying to open-ended signage scrutiny, it hasn't worked out in the favor of jurisdictions, and it was upheld by a unanimous decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. So I mean, it's relaying that to Jolene, honestly, when we were starting to go down the path of talking about banners or temporary signage, that's exactly what took place in the town of Gilbert. So.
Yeah, but that was signage, and that was content-based signage, and it wasn't adopted by the city as speech. So that's why we have to adopt this as ours.
I see. Okay, so this mechanism is specific, and you have reasons why you can't just, okay, got it. Thank you. Very helpful.
For the record, on that citation, the Supreme Court agreed with me. Just
So why we don't have election or campaign signs in our sign ordinance anymore. We have temporary signs, because if you have to read it to regulate it, you're into a Gilbert situation.
Sorry, it was not fun after that decision was rendered.
So
Gabe left after that. He got out free.
Yeah.
So I have a question, Mayor, for the Vice Mayor.
Please.
So I'm uncomfortable with the flagpoles, but I support the idea, and I think I also heard the mayor said she's more open to hearing what direction you were going with the banner policy. And I think I would feel more comfortable adopting a speech policy for banner sites, because we, as a council, can make determination whether to have it at the flagpole or at the banner sites, as you suggested.
well, I think we were just dissuaded from that approach because the Supreme Court doesn't like it.
So what people could do, but they could do that now if they wanted to. So if during Gay Pride Month, there's going to be an event in town, someone could rent a banner space under our current policy, pay the fee that we charge for doing a banner, put Gay Pride flag on, and advertise the event. That would be perfectly acceptable under our current rules. We don't have to do anything to allow that to happen.
But there has to be an event.
Event is
There has to
open.
be an event.
Yeah, it's an event open to the public and and it also serves the community, as I recall. Yeah, so it's a community event, I think. Whereas the flag is, this is our property, this is our forum, and we we get to pick and choose who goes in that forum if we have a policy. If we don't have a policy and we start picking and choosing, that's when we get into the free speech issues.
And that's where we can choose to elect to modify the policy for the banner sites. If we all don't want, if we feel that this is not appropriate on a flagpole, that we would like to see it more on a
That's what you were
banner.
discussing with the Supreme Court case, you can't. That was the discussion a moment ago, what. Mr.
Yeah,
Flores
about
was
mixing
alluding to.
signs, yeah, reading the content and regulating the content through a banner or a sign.
We wouldn't be regulating a content. We would just state that their flag could be there at the banner site during a certain time, but we're not stating that there should be content with it.
I'm not sure I'm understanding your point, and I'm asking, looking at the city attorney, do you understand what she's saying?
So like suppose, okay, so Gay Pride Month, right? Suppose they want to put the flag there at the banner site. Then I think we are more comfortable with having it flown at the banner site than having it at our flag poles. That's what I'm saying.
The current, the current proposal is that it would fly at City Hall and other locations as designated by the council. Council could certainly erect flag poles elsewhere or erect other ways to display that. It's not an approach I think staff would recommend based on the discussion we've had tonight. But certainly council is able to adopt policies as it sees fit.
And I think what Councilmember Leading is suggesting would require changing the banner policy. She's suggesting changing the banner policy so that it wouldn't require there to be an event. Is that a fair statement, Councilmember?
Correct.
That
is correct. And then I have a further question for the city attorney. If we put it in the hands of the responsibility of staff, which would open us more to litigation, if it's a council decision or if it then gets a staff decision?
I think staff is just going to make a recommendation, but the council will finally make the ultimate decision, so it would take city action. So it's not going to just be. They'd make a recommendation, and the council would either accept their recommendation, modify their recommendation, or not accept their recommendation.
But I think in general, the city council gets much wider deference than
Yes.
than the city staff or the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So are we going to have a motion here, or we're not going to have a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion, but I'm not clear, Sally, on where you stand. Are you comfortable with what Nisa proposed?
I had suggested that was the right direction. I think that was an improvement. I do have some discomfort, but on the other hand, I also have some discomfort with us not being able to make supportive gestures, which would be, government speech and welcome by the majority of the community. So I think you can make a motion and.
I'll just say my concerns. I think you and I share some of the same concerns. I'm hoping that, by staff doing the research and the gatekeeping, that the types of government speech that we think would not be representative of our community will get vetted through that process. And so when they bring the recommendations to us and what they have found, that will make it easier for us to make the decision as the decision-making body.
I'll just say, I think the easy ones will be easy and the hard ones will still be hard. And if you think that staff is going to sort that for you, I think you're deluding yourself.
Make the motion, Councilmember Liger.
Before I make it, clearly I've been the strongest advocate for the flag raising policy. It was my original request to put this over to the agenda item. I am not insensitive, nor, and it's not the case that I don't recognize that this could put the council in some very uncomfortable and difficult positions. I am not unaware of this being another burden on staff time and resources. I firmly believe that we're going to adopt the policy, assuming we do adopt it, that we're not going to have a lot of controversy coming out of this policy. And if it turns out that I'm wrong and we are getting a lot of controversy out of this policy, I would support amending it or eliminating it as would be appropriate.
Should we do it as a pilot? Should we revisit it? You can always revisit a policy even if you don't call it a pilot. But by calling it a pilot, it makes it, and I know what is, I think I recommend, let's do it as a.
I want to make sure it sunsets.
I know what I know what, I think we make it as a pilot and we revisit it. I think that I
think that would be an interesting. I thought about that, but I felt like, we either commit or we don't commit. But if, since you vocalized it.
Because you don't want a situation where we adopt the policy and one application comes
Part of the meaning, it's going to sunset after 1 year unless it's readopted.
or we revisit it. So the pilot, you have the sunset, but we revisit it at that time if we want to make it permanent.
So we revisited within 1 year.
Yeah, it would be a report back to the council. We had, in the last 12 months, we had this many applications and this is, or we had one flag that was approved that caused a lot of controversy or something like that.
Or one wacky one that we wish it
And come forward and just why we can't talk about the lawsuit that we're in.
Okay, then, Madam Mayor, I move that the council adopt resolution number 2022 blank, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Los Altos flag raising policy, which is included in the packet as agenda item number 9. This is the first proposed resolution. The second proposed resolution has the same title, but the second resolution is the proposal which would not allow for flags to be raised. So I propose that we adopt the first resolution as a pilot program with instructions to staff to bring back a review no later than December 31st, 2023. And with the amendment that the mayor does not have referral authority. And I don't know if we need this as an amendment or if it's simply instruction to staff that we request a recommendation with respect to any application that is brought to the council.
We can make those changes, yeah.
I think what he wanted was clarification whether it needed to be in the motion or whether it should be just direction to staff. And I think what you're saying is you want it in the motion.
Yeah, well, there's been direction to remove the referral of the mayor and that also that it would be a staff recommendation.
Staff shall make a recommendation.
And I'm trying to figure out where it would go in this.
Find those things.
Yeah.
And there is one typo in the now therefore. The last line of the now therefore reads, hereby adopts policy attached hereto as exhibit 1. It should read, hereby adopts the policy attached hereto as exhibit 1.
I will second the motion. City Clerk?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, if you are in favor of the motion as articulated by Councilmember Weinberg, please indicate so by answering in the affirmative. Councilmember Flyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Liang.
No.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Meadows.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Enander.
No.
Thank you. Motion passes 3 in favor, 2 nays.
Thank you very much. We will move to item 10. regarding the appointment of a representative to the Valley Transportation Authority North County Cities Group. This is to nominate a council member to serve as the VTA board alternate for the North County Cities Group. This is a little bit confusing. So I'm going to take a stab at it, and then I know that council member Liang will straighten me out if I messed it up, or else the city manager will. So each of the cities in the 4 cities that comprise this North County Cities Group have a representative to the policy group. This is not what we're talking about tonight. That's a mayoral appointment, and Councilmember Liang has been our appointee to that for at least the last 2 years, as far as I recall, maybe longer. Prior to that, I think it was Councilmember Bruins. However, that group has one person, not a member of the group, but someone from one of the cities that is nominated by their home city, that group selects to be the board member that sits on the overall big VTA board. The group also appoints an alternate. That alternate can be a member, can or must be a member of that North County's policy group. What we're being asked to do tonight is to nominate someone from our city to serve as the board alternate. The board alternate sits on the board only in the event that the regular board member can't be there. And the timing of doing this and the procedure for doing this is set in bylaws that we were provided that are amongst the most convoluted things I have read. And I'm not an attorney, so maybe the 2 attorneys here made more sense of them than I did. But what I do understand is background that was provided also by the city manager. The person who has been for the past 2 years the board member from the North County cities is the current mayor in Palo Alto. And last night, the city council in Palo Alto voted to nominate him to continue as the board member representative, which is allowed in the bylaws that they can have additional terms. Otherwise, this rotates according to a certain formula. It is desirable, but not mandatory, that the person who is the alternate be available to succeed that person whenever that person's term would be up. We have I'm sorry, say again?
That's not necessary.
It's not necessary. Okay, not necessary. Yes, first boo-boo. The document that we have from staff explains what the qualifications and options are. I want to thank Mr. Maginot for putting that together. That was not an easy thing to do. So with that as background, Mr. Maginot, do you want to add anything to what I said or what I bungled so far? Mr. Weinberg. Mr. Weinberg, go ahead.
A clarification.
Yeah.
I believe what you're saying is that we are selecting our candidate to possibly be elected as the alternate.
Designated.
We are not selecting the alternate.
That is correct.
Now, as a practical matter, the bylaws do have a rotation of which cities will have a representative actually sitting on the VTA board. And as a matter of practice and practicality, I think it is usual for the next city in line to have their proposed alternate be elected as the alternate, because that's the next presumption person to go into the chair as to go onto the VTA board.
That was their notion when they created that set of bylaws, but that they've had at least one situation that I know of where the person or the city that would have rotated into the board
Correct.
position.
After Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills is actually next in line.
Right.
But it's my understanding that Los Altos Hills is declining to nominate someone to serve on the board, in which case it would then fall to
They're
Los
not being
Altos.
asked to nominate anyone to serve on
But
the
when it is their turn, it appears that right now that there's no one who wants to do it. If that were the case, then it would fall to Los Altos. Now, it's still possible that Mountain View could nominate someone and the members, the voting members of Group 2 could vote for that person.
Or if the North County's group selects the current representative, the current board member, Mr. Burt, to continue in the role for, let's say, another 2 years.
Which is
Probable, I think we all agree is probable. Then Los Altos Hills could also change their mind in the next 2 years.
Yes, but what I wanted to clarify is that we're not selecting who the alternate is going to
That's
be.
correct.
We are selecting a nominee to be the alternate.
Correct. And I believe we also have the option to put forward more than one nominee if we choose to do so. And then leave it to the North County's group to decide how they want to puzzle it out based on their.
I'm just gonna throw
knowledge of the future.
And it's been done in the past where it's been done in, Mayor, so sorry to interrupt.
Go
It's
ahead.
been done- And it's been done in the past where cities have put forth 2 nominees.
Yes, I'm aware of that also. Councilmember Flagler.
It's okay.
So another clarification, because I thought I understood it until Mr. Magino's second email came in. As I was writing you, thank you for clarifying, very helpful. And then this email comes in and I was like, oh my God, I sent that too soon. So the clarification is, so we're talking about whether to essentially nominate an alternate or more than one alternate for the North County group to choose as an alternate for the board.
Right, you did that very well.
Thank you. And then that is different from the mayor's assignments that we'll be doing in the next couple weeks, where there is someone who sits on the VTA group 2, and that's not
That's the policy.
at the policy position, and that is, it could be the same person.
It could be. It doesn't have.
But it doesn't have to be. So if I understood what you said, Councilmember Liang, you've served as on the policy for like 5 years, right?
No, I've served longer, since 2000, since 2017.
Okay, but then you've been the alternate board
So,
member for 2 years.
correct.
Do I have it? Okay. All right, thank you. I think I understand where that stands. Great.
Okay.
And I would like to continue serving as alternate.
Okay, well then, I will move that we nominate Councilmember Lee Eng as a council member to be available to serve as the board alternate for the North County Cities Group.
You might want to take public comment.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm so tied up in all these
Everybody was
ins
in
and
the weeds.
outs.
Yeah, everybody was in the weeds. Yeah.
Everybody was in the weeds. We were trying to get out of the weeds.
There were a lot of weeds.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. It was just like those kelp beds in Monterey. Just about the time you think you're clear, you get another one. Thank you very much, City Attorney. Please, Clerk, would you please see if there are any people online that would like to make a comment? And meanwhile, I'll ask if there's anyone in the chamber who wants to comment on this. I'm getting a no.
Members attending virtually, if you'd like to comment on this item, please indicate so by raising your hand. Mayor, we have one person with their hand raised.
Thank you. Would you please call on that person?
Yes, our speaker is Miss Roberta Phillips.
Hi, everyone. So I know this is sort of convoluted, but I just want to remind you that Lynette was able to convince the VTA to provide an additional bus line for the kids who live in South Los Altos that go to Homestead High and others. And I know a lot of the residents in Los Altos really appreciated that service and the work that she did to provide busing for those kids. The parents didn't have to drive their kids to school. So I just wanted to mention that as one of the accomplishments that she did, and hope that you do put her back on as the alternate. Thank you.
And Mayor, there's no one else with their hand raised.
Thank you very much. Then we'll come back. And
Madam Mayor,
Go ahead.
before you make your nomination,
Sure.
I would like to put my name out there as someone who is interested in being nominated by this council as the alternate.
And you jumped ahead of me, Councilmember Weinberg. I was gonna make a motion to nominate you and I'll give a speech as to why you made mayor. I really appreciate all the work that Councilmember Lee Eng has done over the years. I'm very familiar with the work and the advocacy she has done on behalf of our residents. But as we know, we have term limits in Los Altos, and Councilmember Lee Eng will be termed out in 2 years, whereas Councilmember Weinberg has 2 years and possibly another 4 years. And I'm very familiar with the VTA leadership. And, you know, as a smaller city, it's good to have someone who's well positioned to maybe take the big chair, as we used to say back in the day on the VTA board, representing North County. And so my support and motion to nominate Councilmember Weinberg, it's not showing a lack of appreciation for what Councilmember Lee Eng has done. I'm looking ahead and what I think is really in the best interest of Los Altos residents and also North County. And as we said, you know, tomorrow, I think the North County group will get together and they're going to vote on who the big chairperson is and who the alternate to that person is. And it's not set in stone who either of those people will be. And so I really think Councilmember Weinberg, he has been serving in different roles on the VTA. You know, he's our complete streets liaison. He did us extra, I don't want to call it CLE, but, you know, continuing education to learn more about this area. And so he's well positioned, well qualified, like Councilmember Lee Eng, but I see he has a longer runway to really represent us 2+ years. And so that's why I'm nominating him.
I would like to suggest that we forward both nominations and that we put both names forward to the policy committee and have them with the full knowledge of what the circumstances are with respect to future terms and so on. I think there's some arguments that could be made that, given the concerns that the grand juries had about the depth of knowledge in the board and so on, that having the backup person be someone who has the depth of knowledge that Councilmember Lee Eng has is also a very good argument. And as always, Councilmember Fliger, you make a good argument for putting forth Councilmember Weinberg. And so I would like to suggest we give them both and tell them we're just got so many smart people, we couldn't pick between the two of them, and let them decide.
So one thing I actually don't know how the process works, and I don't know if the city attorney does or Mr. Maginot. If we were to put 2 names forward, who would be the voting member tomorrow for Los Altos to pick the board member and the alternate?
Tomorrow, we're not voting. Tomorrow, we're working on the
Whenever the vote is,
the bylaw amendments. Tomorrow, the agenda is that we're working to clean up the bylaws.
So whenever the vote will occur to pick the board, the North County board member and the alternate, if we were to move forward 2 names tonight, you and Councilmember Weinberg, who would be the voting member to pick the board representative and the alternate?
I'm the voting member.
You would be the voting member because of your appointment from last time.
That assumes, and I'm just verifying, when is that vote going to occur?
Per the current bylaws, as they're currently written.
Which could change tomorrow if they change it.
The policy advisory committee member of the cities is the voting member for the North County Cities Group. If that member is not able to participate, then the alternate to the policy advisory committee becomes the voting member.
To the mayor's question, we know the incoming mayor will be making assignments in a couple weeks. So do we know, Councilmember Liang or Mr. Maginot, when that vote will occur on who will be the board member and the alternate?
It will be determined after the meeting tomorrow. And I would like to clarify that in history as well, when you talk about history of the longer runway, we have had members who have served as alternates that were termed out, like Liz Nis in Palo Alto. We also have people who have served and have not been reelected back in. So I appreciate your thoughts on this, but I would agree with Mayor that maybe we can let both people be put forward. And I think it's important that we have continuity as well. And I don't have to be a PAC member to serve as an alternate as well. It's not a requirement that members serve as PAC members while they continue to remain as alternates.
So nothing that we would do here in any way constrains the discretion of the incoming mayor as to who gets selected as the next PAC member.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And clarification, do we have to select a term for this alternate, correct?
No, the term is clearly designated in the bylaws that the alternate remains on for a 2-year term.
No, that was one of the emails today that
Yeah.
said choose 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, that's it's a 2-year term, and we need to clean. That's why we're cleaning up some of the language today, tomorrow.
And tomorrow they're not voting on the alternate.
No, we are not voting on our alternate, but based on our holiday schedule, we needed to put forth nominations.
Because the selection is supposed to be made before the end of the calendar year.
Yes. Unless what happens is it can be, yeah,
Unless they change it tomorrow.
yeah.
And I'll just add, and Councilmember Liang, you raised the point about there's some council members who only serve for 2 years. I remember you actually making the opposite argument when another council member was up and she only had 2 years left. So, for me, it's a combination of reasons why I strongly support nominating Councilmember Weinberg. And I think it sends a stronger message as a body to submit one name versus 2 names to the North County Board. And that's why my preference is to only submit one name. And I am supporting Councilmember Weinberg. If majority or more council members want to submit 2 names, I am not opposed to it. My preference is to send one person with a strong support from council as our representative. And hopefully he'll get picked to be the alternate and set him up in a good position to be a board representative in the future.
Madam Mayor, may I make another comment? Sure. 2 years ago, when I first came onto the council, I was initially selected by the mayor to be the VTA PAC lead. And at the meeting where we were discussing appointments, I don't say came clean, but I acknowledged that I did not meet at least 2 of the 4 criteria that are needed for a go-to member or to serve as the lead on the PAC. So I voluntarily stepped aside because I didn't feel like I met the criteria. And Councilmember Liang also indicated that she thought she was in a position where she might have a leadership role. But the reality is that if Mayor Burt is reappointed for at least another year, Councilmember Liang will not have an opportunity for that leadership role because she will have turned out in less than 2 years. The VTA is something in which I've always been interested. I pay very close attention to it. I want the opportunity to be able to serve our community, the city on Route 2, and to serve as an alternate and hopefully someday serve as a director of the VTA. I still have that opportunity. And I would very much appreciate the support of my colleagues to nominate me as our sole representative to be an alternate so that I then have a clear runway to make a compelling presentation after Mr. Burt steps down, assuming Los Altos Hills doesn't want it, that I should then take over as be elected as the next representative to the board from Group 2.
So if I can make a comment as well, Mayor,
Please.
I would greatly appreciate it if we could put both names forward. I felt that I've done a great job serving as a VTA representative. There's still a lot of opportunities for Councilmember Weinberg as well to continue serving and even being a possible PAC member. And still be on the path to leadership position. But I feel that my knowledge and my history with VTA would serve well to have me continue on as an alternate. So I would greatly appreciate it if we could put both names forward. And the other thing I would like to talk about is we have a lot of major changes going on at the VTA board. We have a substantial number of people with a high turnover, and we have very little people with historical knowledge. And I have brought that forward, and I can continue to do that, and I will be glad to continue the good work that I feel I've done.
Thank you. But it's not the board, it's an alternate to the board.
Yeah, there's still a lot of informal
Yeah,
stuff.
I understood. I really want to be forward looking on this. I feel that I support Councilmember Weinberg as our vote for the alternate. And I don't want to jump to future agenda items or anything, but I just think, again, with the work, the complete streets philosophy, I really feel that he's got more of the runway for where we need to go. And I very much respect what Councilmember Liang has accomplished and appreciate that. But I too would support one nominee as alternate, keeping in mind that it's probably not going to happen this year anyway, but anyway.
It's not going to happen this year.
Our Mayor Burt will likely be nominated, right? He could be the alternate. That's true. Yeah. Well, yes, so the leadership role. Anyway, I just see there's the potential for a longer runway. Councilmember Weinberg has done the work. We talked about how long and how well Councilmember Liang has served, but it's really been a long time. I think we need to invest in the succession planning so that our representation on Los Altos will not disappear at the end of Councilmember Liang's term. So I will support Councilmember Weinberg as our sole nominee, if that's the word. So.
You know, my preference,
Yes.
which would also have included in making Councilmember Weinberg our PAC representative, but that's obviously something that's going to be at your discretion. So do you want to make a motion?
Mayor, if you made a motion, I'd be glad to second your motion. I'd like to see that motion go forward, and then we can move forward.
And I made a substitute motion.
Yeah, and she made a substitute motion and her substitute motion takes precedence. So
Okay.
vote on the did you have a second?
I haven't had a second yet.
So you need a second.
I will second,
Second.
I will second the substitute motion.
Okay, so the first motion, city clerk, was to put two names forward, Councilmember Lee Eng and Councilmember Weinberg, made by the mayor, seconded by Councilmember Lee Eng. We have a substitute motion made by Councilmember Fliger, seconded by the vice mayor, to put forward only Councilmember Weinberg as the nominee to be board alternate. Please call roll on the substitute motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to confirm, we're council's considering both motions or the second one? I'm sorry.
The second one, the substitute motion, gets considered first. That being the motion to appoint Councilmember or to put forward Councilmember Weinberg as the nominee for board alternate for the North County Cities Group.
Got it. Thank you very much. Members of the council.
We lost you.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that. I'm clicking way too many buttons here right now. Members of the council, if you are in favor with the motion on the table to nominate Councilmember Weinberg to be the sole representative to this body, please indicate so by answering in the affirmative. Councilmember Fliger.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Weinberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee Eng.
I abstain.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Meadows.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mayor Enander.
No.
Thank you. Motion passes 3 in favor.
And because it passes, then the primary motion is not considered.
Can I change my motion, city clerk?
Your motion or your vote?
My vote.
I believe you.
We usually don't allow that. But...
Usually you're not allowed.
Okay, leave it then.
Well, motion.
That's okay.
311.
311, city clerk, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. We're moving now to item number 11. Checking the time. Do you want to just keep plowing through group and not take a break, like our 9 o'clock break? Okay. Number 11, review and provide direction regarding the request for transit service planning on San Antonio Road corridor. Thank you, city manager, for providing us forwarding that letter. And I think what we're looking for here is direction to the staff for a letter to go to VTA. Do we have anything staff wants to say before I take public comment?
I don't believe we have a presentation. I think we have Marisa Lee or Jim Sandoval available to answer questions from council.
Available to answer questions. Okay. Do we have any specific questions, not discussion, but questions for staff before we take public comment? Councilmember Fliger.
Thank you, Mayor. And so Mr. England or Ms. Lee or Mr. Sandoval, we've all seen the letter from VTA's general manager responding to Mayor Burt's letter. And so I'm still curious if there's something else we've already had the response from VTA saying what they plan to do with regards to the corridor and looking at resources. So the letter has been answered.
So, Councilor Fliger, I think as council has read the letter, if council is satisfied with that response, then it doesn't need to take a further position. If council has read the letter and wants to take a position based on that, that would be appropriate.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just want to, for the public benefit, is the letter included in the packet?
Did we get the letter from VTA uploaded?
Vice Mayor Meadows and Mayor Enander, yes, it's in the packet now. It was not included, obviously, because I didn't.
Because it was,
yesterday.
So for anyone who wonders about the letter, you can.
There's now two the letters. One letter is from Mayor Burt, one letter is from VTA.
Right, true.
Okay, City Clerk, would you please inquire whether there's anyone online who wants to comment on this item?
Yes, Mayor, if you'd like to address the council on item number 11 on the agenda, please raise your hand. Mayor, I don't see anyone with their hands raised.
Okay, and there's no one in the chambers who wishes to speak on this matter. So we'll go to discussion, and I'm gonna maybe suggest a path here that could be pretty quick. And that is that we ask staff to draft a letter to VTA, copy to Mr. Burt and the other North County cities, basically says, yes, we want to be involved because we have a lot of vested interest in what you guys are planning to do. And we want to be very active participants and blah, blah.
And thank you for the outline of your.
And thank you for the outline of what you're planning to do and, you know, so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councilmember Lee Ing, do you have anything else you would want added to such a letter? You're on mute, I think.
I think acknowledging the efforts that's going forward and that making sure that we're included on the study that comes up is very good. Thank you.
So I don't know, do we need a motion in this regard? This was a request for direction to staff.
Mayor, I don't think we need a motion. If council would like to see this again, I think that's the only direction we need. We can draft the letter as you've outlined it and send it, or we can bring it back on consent at the next meeting. I think that's the only direction.
I don't think we need to.
We're happy to write the letter.
Two sentences or one really long sentence.
One paragraph of thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much, and 3 sentences of
That no motion necessary.
include us all.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think the mayor signs, or the mayor and the city manager sign.
I would think the mayor.
All right, then we will move to item number 12, tentative council calendar. Do we have any comments or questions on the tentative council calendar?
I do have future agenda items, Mayor. So when to that.
Yep, go ahead, Councilman Flagler.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. England, what time is the December 13th meeting starting?
At our normal time.
No, okay, because in the past, sometimes we start it at 6 as part of the reorg. Am I wrong, Mr. Maginot? Have we? That's what I heard.
With the exception of maybe when your voice there is.
Any other questions on the tentative calendar? Okay, then let's take council or staff reports first, and then we'll take future agenda items. So any reporting out? Going towards. Okay, nobody reporting out. Future agenda items, Councilmember Lee Ing, you said you had something.
Yeah, I would like to have for future discussion of establishing a license plate reader system for our city. Greatly appreciate support. I need only one more member to support my request.
We need one or two, but I'll support it, and I would note that there was a front page article in the last few days about expanded use. I mean, we're one of the few cities that doesn't have this.
Yeah, our neighboring cities have it. It was highlighted at our Cities Association event in Long Beach. Multiple cities have implemented and found great success, but I'll save it for discussion and I could add more. So I guess.
Want this as a future agenda item for discussion, or are you looking for an additional third support for there to be staff work to prepare this. And
I don't think I'll get a third support, so I'll be happy to keep it at discussion.
I don't know. Councilmember Whitaker?
I think it's appropriate for the community to have this discussion. I don't know that, I think if we just have it as a discussion item to hear from the police department and other members of the community where people stand, I think that would be appropriate. I'm not ready to support an affirmative action.
Right. But considering that getting something from the police department would be staff time, we would need 3 people. So I think 3 people to support bringing this back with something from the police chief about the matter and being able to engage the community in a discussion about it can be supported. I know that our uniformed officer in the back is raised his hand, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to say anything that you might want to.
So I just, Madam Mayor and the council, I just want to explain kind of just what this is. I saw your.
No, we can't. I'm sorry. We can't. We can't discuss the subject matter as this item.
Okay.
So, but thank
I
you.
just wanted to just explain.
No, that's quite all right. Appreciate you being available to do that. That's what we're talking about, whether to have that discussion. So, thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Weinberg.
And that timing would be, I mean, we have a lot going on, so it's not necessarily gonna come back in January or come. But it will be up to the chief and the city manager, yeah. The chief, yes, okay.
A lot of priorities.
Yeah.
Priorities.
Yeah, all right, so you got a discussion.
Yep.
Council.
Any other future agenda items?
The other thing is that we could, Mayor, if we get a third vote, we could have a discussion, and that discussion would include the police chief, if we're very specific.
Councilmember Weinberg said, you had that. It would include, Councilmember Weinberg agreed to bring it back.
Oh, I
to
didn't hear it. I didn't hear. So we do have 3 people coming back?
Yes,
Okay,
but we have it to be agendized as a discussion item for community input and to hear from the chief.
correct.
Not
Thank
as
you.
having the staff draft an
Yeah,
ordinance. for
correct,
example.
correct, correct,
Okay.
correct.
Just to make sure everything is clear. Any other future agenda items?
No.
Earlier, one more thing, Mayor.
Councilmember Lee, hang on just a moment. Let me take Councilmember Flagger.
So the reason I hesitated, one is a question, and I think Mr. Sandoval is still on. I just wanted an update. I think we're all notified by the chief about the unfortunate accident that occurred at Foothill and Arboretum in South Los Altos, and I know Mr. Sandoval was working on an update for council on the different intersections and crosswalks along Foothill. And so, Mr. Sandoval, I don't know if you have an update for us, but that unfortunate accident, really reminded us about how urgent and important it is for us to start addressing the concerns we have about safety along Foothill Expressway.
Hi, thank you for raising the question, Council Member Flagler. Yeah, Jim Sandoval, Public Works Director. We are working on a couple avenues. We're putting together a memorandum for the council's request that kind of describes the safety projects or issues that are happening along Foothill and kind of the status of each of those. So we hope to have that complete for you in December. And then the other thing we're doing is we're meeting with the county and I forget the name of the foundation, but the Wojcicki Foundation concerning the intersection of Foothill and West Edith, in addition to our own intersection there at First Los Altos Ave and Edith. They're all kind of interconnected. So we're having kind of a meeting of the minds between the entities to discuss that. And Anthony's actually scheduling that for sometime in December. And we're right in the midst of getting that scheduled with the big group.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. And then two future agenda items. One is, I think we're all familiar with, the concern from residents, not just in Los Altos, but Santa Clara County and up the peninsula related to airplane noise and pollution. And we had a group that was tasked with addressing that and working with other jurisdictions. And we know that group no longer exists, but it still remains a problem. And I had a brief conversation with Mayor Burt about figuring out if we can continue to work together to address it, because very similar to a lot of the complaints I heard over the last 2 months from residents, he's hearing the same thing. And so what I would like to propose bringing back as a future agenda item is forming a subcommittee to explore the different options on how we really tackle this issue. Is working with the federal government. There are different things that we already know need to happen, but we don't have a formal Los Altos City Council appointed individual or group to work with other jurisdictions. And so I would like us to agendize discussing what that could look like. My proposal is to form a subcommittee.
So you're talking about airplane noise, not the chemtrail stuff, right?
Yes, even though I know, yes. So I would need, I think, at least a second, because it's just to form a subcommittee to address this issue.
I'll second that, yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to raise, and I don't know, Mr. Manchin or Mr. England, if this needs to be a future agenda item. I had raised it earlier this year and nothing happened. It's office hours for council members. This came up a lot over the last 2 months as well, where people wanted to figure out how to engage with council, and they know we used to have office hours. And so if this is something you need council to discuss about what it looks like, let us know. If it's just direction as a reminder that if we could do this, I'd really appreciate it.
So, Councilor Flagger, the current, what we're currently doing is, if any council member wants to do office hours, we'll support that based around your schedule and however you want to operate it.
Okay.
So if you want to make it more formal, we would need direction, but as of now, council can do it how they want, and staff is able to support as needed.
And host it on our city website.
However, yes.
We had a past practice of doing them. We had one rotating, we had a rotating schedule. It was set up at the beginning of the year. I actually brought back my 10th sign back and turned it in to our city manager, who said, wow, that's cool. I didn't know we had those.
Yep.
And you don't have one.
Yeah, mine's in my garage.
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah.
Ten
We used
sign.
to have in-person office hours, and we had
And people remember, like over the last 2 months talking to residents, they're like, how do we engage with you guys?
For the club who actually got to have council meetings and council changes.
So, no, this is when we used to. Yeah, we used to go places and have office hours, like at Rancho, and we would sit there and people would come, or at the park, and people would come, or at Grant Park in one of the rooms, and people would come, and we learned stuff. Yep, we found out things. That was the days before everything came by email.
So just to confirm, if we basically set up our own office hours and let you know, I want my office hours to be the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month from 12 to 2 at X spot. You'll post it on the website.
The difference is we didn't used to announce who the council member was.
It was a surprise.
It was anonymous. It was potluck. You got whichever council member was.
Sometimes you'd see the resident walk up and look.
Yes. Yeah, be fun. So I have.
Thank you, Mr. England. Thank you.
So I have one that's a question of the city attorney. And that is, this is with respect to historical designations and historical code. We adopted tonight for the second reading, and it'll now go into effect, that says that we are adopting the California Historical Building Code. My question is there anything in that code or any other legislation that is going to compel us to update, or where it would be wise for us to update our historical resource inventory?
I have to look at it. Nick, do you have any idea?
There's not anything that's specific in regards to something that would require us to do so. A lot of it is about improvements to historic structures.
Yeah.
So it essentially,
It
that
allows-
section of the building code kind of creates a vesting of certain parameters in the building code where they don't have to bring certain things up to code
Yeah.
by today's standards.
Yeah, so you get to opt into the historic building code, so it.
So that you don't have to do certain other
You
things.
can have porches that are too narrow and certain.
And honestly, the Winchester House, I mean, I hate to say that, like, just corny as it is, it's a perfect example of the historic building code. There's so many different things that actually even in there as of being open to the public, that they didn't have to do certain little tweaks, but they just had to close it off.
Right.
But if it was just someone's home and they just wanted to make an improvement, they don't have to rip everything out because it's for private.
I
entities.
still think that it would be wise, or not that you don't have enough to do, Mr. Zorns, that the city commit itself to updating the HRI as a tool that will make ultimately your job easier.
As a part of the initiation of the comprehensive general plan overhaul, which was already included in the CIP budget to start in the next fiscal cycle, so it remains in there. That will be a part of the overall general plan overhaul, because you have to account for historic inventory in order to make sure your designations are correct.
And that comes back to council, right?
100%.
We have to
Yep.
Yeah, well, the whole general plan is, that's a big $2 million project. So I'm reassured to hear that it is part of that. Be nice if we could start it before that because of other issues that go on. Anything else? Councilmember Lee Ying, I think you had one more item.
Yeah, I did, because I wanted to make sure not everyone forgets. I think the festivities for our Los Altos turning 70 years old begins on Thursday. And so I want to remind everyone that the first event starts Thursday at the History Museum.
Actually, no, the venue has changed.
Oh, okay, so good thing
You grabbed my item, but that's all right. Go ahead. I'll just.
Oh,
tell
that's
you-
okay, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
everybody was aware of the first of many more festivities and to join the fun.
Yep, and it will be held in this building, same time as what's been advertised, noon to 2, owing to the inclement weather. And all I can say is if you want it to rain in California, plan an outdoor activity. And then it'll rain, and boy, are we gonna get rain. So when it went from a maybe to oh, this is gonna be a big one. I wanna thank the staff, Mr. England, Manny Hernandez, also Elizabeth Ward, demonstrated incredible flexibility and helpfulness while we jiggered around where we're gonna do this.
And Mayor, let me say thank you for planning the first of many festivities. Unfortunately, I will not be able to join you on Thursday. I have another commitment. But looking forward to celebrating at the other festivities.
Well,
And on that note, Friday is the Joint Community Service Awards luncheon.
Right.
So come on, come on.
Yes, I know you won't be there, but please, everybody, be here for that. And also Thursday, not only you can come to the daytime event inside, and then you can go stand in the rain for the tree lighting at 6 o'clock. I think it's 4 to 6 at
That's fun.
Veterans Plaza.
They can't move that.
And they can't move that. So that's just gonna be a wet event. That's all I can say. Any other announcements from staff, Mr. England?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Then we are adjourned at 9:14. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Good night.
Next